I smelled the Alpha King's lie, then his ferret exposed his secret to me. The glass slipped before Nadia even had a chance to grab it. 1 second it was balanced on the edge of the serving tray. The next, it was in the air, and then it was in pieces on the marble floor, and so were 8 more glasses, because her elbow had caught the entire tray when she turned too fast, and the tray had met the chest of the man standing directly behind her. Not a wall, a chest, a very solid, very tall, very unhappy chest. Nadia stood in the wreckage of 9 crystal wine glasses and looked up. She had worked over 40 summit events in her 3 years as a certified Interpack translator. She had survived a food fight between the eastern border wolves and the coastal ridge pack. She had talked a heated territorial dispute down from almost bloodshed with 2 sentences and a very calm voice. She was good at staying composed in rooms full of people who could run faster, hit harder, and smell better than her. She was not composed right now. The man she had collided with was looking down at her with an expression that gave nothing away. That was the first thing she noticed. Most people, when a tray of wine glasses exploded into their chest, had some kind of visible reaction. Surprise, irritation, a flinch. This man had none of those things. He simply looked at her, dark eyes steady, jaw set, his expensive gray jacket now carrying a spreading stain of red wine across the left side. He was tall, not just tall, the kind of tall that reorganized the space around him. His hair was dark and slightly too long for whatever formal event this was supposed to be, and his face was— she stopped cataloging his face immediately, because that was not useful information. "I am so sorry," she said. Her voice came out steady, which she was proud of. "I did not see you. I will cover the cost of the cleaning, of course, and I will speak to the event coordinator about the glass replacement." "It is fine," he said. 2 words flat, no irritation in them but no warmth either, just 2 words that landed like stones dropped from a height. She bent to pick up the largest piece of glass, because standing still in a disaster she had caused felt wrong. A hand appeared before she could reach it, not his, a staff member's, and she straightened back up. "It is genuinely not fine," she said, because she was constitutionally unable to accept a polite dismissal when she had clearly ruined someone's evening. "Your jacket needs immediate attention or the stain will set. If you go to the staff room on the 3rd floor, they keep a solvent kit." "I know where it is," he said. She blinked. He said it like someone who had been here before, but the guest list for the Alpha Summit was not public, and she had not seen this man at any of the pre-summit registrations. She had a good memory for faces. She would have remembered this one. "Are you a returning attendee?" she asked. Professional reflex. She was good at professional reflexes. Something moved across his expression, so small and so fast that she nearly missed it. But she did not miss it, because that was her other skill, the one she had never put on any professional resume. "First time," he said. The taste hit the back of her tongue like a coin dropped into hot water. Burnt copper, sharp and immediate and absolutely unmistakable. He was lying. Nadia kept her face calm. She was extremely good at keeping her face calm when the burnt copper came, because she had been doing it her entire life. Since she was 7 years old and her mother had told her that the neighbor's dog had gone to live on a farm and she had tasted that same metallic sharpness and had not understood yet what it meant. Since she was 12 and her teacher had said she was the most talented student he had ever seen, and she had known, with horrible clarity, that he said it to every student in every class. Since she was 19 and a boy had told her he loved her, and the burnt copper had flooded her mouth so completely that she had excused herself to be sick in the bathroom. She had never told anyone. She had learned very early that telling people you could taste their lies was the fastest way to end up alone. "Well," she said, smiling in the way she had practiced, the smile that looked warm without giving anything away, "welcome to the summit. I hope the rest of your evening is considerably less eventful than the last 30 seconds. He looked at her for a moment longer than was strictly comfortable. "I am sure it will be," he said. No burnt copper, that part at least was true. She retrieved her empty tray from the staff member who had swept up the glass, made her apologies to the event coordinator, a harried woman named Gloria who waved her off without looking up, and found a quiet corner near the east window to collect herself. The Alpha Summit was held every 4 years at the Whitmore Estate, a ridiculous building in the northern hills that had more columns than it needed, and a ballroom large enough to comfortably fit every wolf pack representative in the Northern Territories, which was, at present count, 114 people, give or take a handful of unofficial attendees who always slipped through under deliberately vague credentials. Nadia was not a wolf. She had made peace with that particular fact at around age 15, when it became clear that her ability was the only extraordinary thing about her, and it was not the kind of extraordinary that anyone celebrated. She was human. She worked for the Neutral Translators Guild, which supplied human mediators and language specialists to interpack events where having a neutral, non-aligned party was politically valuable. She spoke 4 languages fluently and 2 more passably. She was good at her job. She was not supposed to be good at detecting lies. That was not in her job description. It was not in anyone's job description, because as far as the world was concerned, that particular ability did not exist in humans. She watched the man in the wine-stained jacket move through the room from her corner by the window. He moved wrong. She noticed it immediately and then spent a moment being annoyed with herself for noticing. But it was true, he moved through a room full of wolf pack representatives the way someone moved through a room they owned. Not arrogant, not aggressive, just settled, like the floor had been expecting his footsteps specifically. Every person he passed gave him a fraction more space than was socially required. Nobody did that to a council delegate. Nadia filed the observation away in the back of her mind, in the drawer she kept for things that were interesting but not her business, and went to find the pre-summit translation briefing room. She almost made it. Miss Vance. She turned. Gloria, the event coordinator, was cutting toward her through the crowd with the expression of someone who had just discovered a new problem, and had decided it was Nadia's problem too. "I need to reassign your schedule," Gloria said, arriving slightly out of breath. She was holding a tablet and a coffee cup and appeared to have given up on sleeping sometime last week. "Your original assignment was the Western Coastal Delegation, yes?" "Yes," Nadia said. "Coastal and Northern Ridge joint sessions, 3 days, simultaneous translation and mediation support. The Coastal Delegation has brought their own translator. Late edition just confirmed." Gloria was already typing. "I am moving you to the independent delegate track. Smaller assignments, one-on-one support." But she paused, scanning her tablet. "Your primary assignment is going to be Delegate Voss. Ren Voss. He is registered as an independent council observer. No declared pack affiliation." Nadia felt something prickle at the back of her neck. "Which delegation does he represent?" she asked. "None, formally. He is listed as an independent observer with council credentials. It happens occasionally, senior figures who attend without direct representation." Gloria handed her a printed profile card. The photograph on it was slightly blurry, the way photographs of powerful people in official documents always seem to be, as though the camera itself was uncertain. He requested a translator and liaison for the full 3 days. "You are the most qualified neutral I have available. Start tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, breakfast briefing room." Gloria was already moving on to her next crisis. Nadia looked at the profile card. Ren Voss, council observer, no pack affiliation listed. The photograph showed a man with dark eyes and a jaw that looked like it had been cut from something dense and permanent. She had already tasted the lie he told about first-time attendance. She put the card in her jacket pocket and told herself very firmly that this was just a job assignment. She was still telling herself that when she got to her room, when she organized her translation notes for the morning, and when she lay in the dark and listened to the old estate settle around her. The burnt copper taste was gone. It always faded after a few hours. It never completely disappeared. She was 7 minutes early to the breakfast briefing room, which meant she was the first one there, which meant she had the distinct pleasure of sitting at a table set for 2, and watching the door with the particular alertness of someone who had decided overnight to treat this assignment as purely professional, and was therefore slightly too focused on appearing relaxed. He arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. No, he arrived at 5 seconds before 8, which meant he had been waiting somewhere nearby and timed his entry. That was a strange thing to notice, and she noticed it anyway. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he said, and sat down across from her. He had changed jackets. This one was charcoal fitted with no wine stains. He looked rested in a way that made her briefly suspicious. Because the estate beds were not comfortable, she knew this from previous summits, and yet he had the unhurried, present quality of someone who had slept well and woken slowly. A small white head emerged from his breast pocket. Nadia stared. The ferret, because it was absolutely a ferret, small and white and bright-eyed, and wearing a tiny collar she could not read the tag on from across the table, looked directly at her with the focused attention of something much larger than itself. "You brought a ferret," she said. "He goes where I go," Ren said, with the tone of someone who had explained this many times and found the explanation self-evident. "To the Alpha Summit. To the Alpha Summit." She looked at the ferret. The ferret looked at her. It made a small sound, not quite a chirp, not quite a chatter, that she could not assign a meaning to. "What is his name?" she asked. "Pip. Pip," she repeated. Pip's whiskers moved. He seemed satisfied with the acknowledgement. "I have your briefing materials," Nadia said, pulling her folder from her bag because she was a professional and this was a professional breakfast. "The summit runs 3 full days plus a closing ceremony on the morning of the 4th. Your schedule as an independent observer gives you access to all open sessions and 2 restricted mediation sessions where a neutral translator will be required. That is where I will be most active on your behalf. Is there a particular area of focus for your observation? Trade agreements, territorial boundaries, succession protocols." He was looking at her briefing folder, then at her. "All of them," he said. She waited for more. More did not come. "That is a broad scope," she said. "I have broad interests. Burnt copper, faint, just a trace of it, barely there but present. Not a flat lie, more like an incomplete truth. He did have broad interests, that part was real. The reason for those broad interests was what he was keeping back." "Of course," she said, and made a note in her folder. A server arrived with coffee. Ren looked at the cup it placed in front of him, and Nadia watched him decide whether to drink it with the careful neutrality of someone accustomed to deciding things carefully. He drank it. "You have done this before," he said. "Not a question. 14 summits in 3 years, she said. "I started young." "How young?" 22, she paused. "Most translators start later. I had an accelerated path." "Why?" She looked at him. That was a personal question for 8 in the morning on the first day of a professional assignment. "I was good at it," she said. No burnt copper, that was simply true. Something shifted in his expression, very slightly, the way light shifts when a cloud moves the same scene but different. "Languages?" he asked. "Partly," she said. She did not explain the rest. She never explained the rest. Pip climbed out of Ren's pocket, walked along the table edge with the confidence of an animal who had never once considered that he might not be allowed to, and sat down approximately 6 inches from Nadia's coffee cup. He looked at her folder. He looked at her. He looked at Ren. Then he turned around twice and curled up on the corner of the table as though he lived there. "He likes you," Ren said. He said it the way someone states a fact that carries more weight than the words themselves. "Is that unusual?" Nadia asked. Ren looked at Pip, then at her. "Yes," he said. "No burnt copper, absolutely none." She picked up her pen and returned to her briefing notes, and she told herself for the second time that morning that this was just a job. She was beginning to suspect that was the lie she was telling herself. The first session of the summit was a general assembly, all delegations present, a formal statement of intent from the summit chair, followed by 3 hours of procedural discussion that Nadia had learned over 14 summits was where the real information lived. Not in what was said, in who sat near whom, in which pack representatives avoided each other's eye line, in the small territorial shifts of body language that told you more about alliances and grievances than any formal declaration would. She sat slightly behind and to the left of Ren's seat in the observer gallery, which gave her a clear view of both him and the floor below. Her earpiece was in. Her notepad was ready. This was where she was useful, and being useful had always felt steadier than most things. He was watching the floor with an intensity that made her uncomfortable in a way she could not immediately name. Not because he was tense, he was not tense, but because the quality of his attention was the kind that came from genuine authority, not curiosity. He was not observing these proceedings. He was evaluating them. She wrote that down in her private shorthand and underlined it twice. Pip sat in the breast pocket, occasionally lifting his head when a new voice spoke, as if he was taking his own notes. When the Northern Corridor Pack representative made a statement about the southern trade route boundaries, Wren's jaw tightened fractionally. She caught it. She was almost certain no one else in the gallery did. She leaned forward slightly and said, very quietly near his ear, "The Northern Corridor has been pushing the boundary language for 3 summits. They typically escalate in the restricted sessions." He did not turn his head, but she saw him register it. "How do you know?" he asked just as quietly. "I have been to the last 3 summits," she said. "I pay attention." A pause. "So do I," he said. Burnt copper, a whisper of it, not a lie exactly, more like a statement that meant something different than it appeared to mean. She straightened back in her chair. On the floor below, the session chair called for a recess. Pip lifted his head, looked directly at Nadia, and made his small not-quite-chirp sound again. She was beginning to think Pip was trying to tell her something. She was not yet ready to figure out what. The afternoon brought 3 smaller breakout sessions and a formal dinner that Nadia was technically not required to attend, but had attended for 14 summits because the dinner table was where half the real summit happened. She found her seat card near the middle of the long table, between a trade liaison from the Eastern Ridge and an elderly neutral observer she recognized from past events. Wren was seated at the far end. Not the head of the table, that was the summit chair's position, but 2 seats from it, which was not where independent observers were typically placed. Independent observers went near the middle, near the sides. Near the people who were present but not central. She looked at the seating arrangement for a long moment. Then she picked up her water glass and paid very careful attention to her soup. The elderly observer beside her, a woman named Clara who had been attending Interpack summits since before Nadia was born, leaned slightly toward her. "Interesting placement for a council observer," Clara said, in the tone of someone who had noticed many interesting things over many decades and had learned to mention them very quietly. "The coordinators manage the seating," Nadia said. "They do," Clara agreed. "Someone told them where he goes." Nadia looked at Wren. He was listening to the person beside him with the same focused, evaluative attention he had given the morning session. He was not looking at her. Pip was not visible. He was presumably in the jacket pocket, managing his own dinner plans. "Do you know him?" Nadia asked Clara. Clara took a sip of water. "I know of the name," she said. "Whether I know the man," she set her glass down, "that remains to be seen." That was the most interesting non-answer Nadia had received in recent memory. She went to bed that night with the burnt copper catalog running in her head like a list she could not stop adding to. First-time attendee, lie. Broad interests, incomplete. Everything else he had said throughout the day had been technically true, which was its own kind of unsettling because most people lied casually without thinking, the small social lubricant lies that barely registered. Wren did not lie casually, he did not lie often. When he lied, it was deliberate, considered, specific. That was not what liars did. That was what people with something particular to protect did. She stared at the ceiling of her estate room and thought about the way he had moved through the ballroom, the space people gave him, the seating placement at dinner, the quality of attention he gave to a room that was supposedly beneath his official rank. She thought about what Clara had said. "Whether I know the man, that remains to be seen." She thought about Pip, sitting on the corner of the table that morning like he owned it. She thought about first time and the size of the lie it had been, not small, not casual, enormous, the kind of lie that was load-bearing. The kind that held up something else. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep for a long time. She woke up counting. Not sheep, lies. She woke up in the gray before sunrise with the copper taste still faint on the back of her tongue from the night before, and her mind already running the list she had started at dinner, and not quite finished before she fell into a shallow, unsatisfying sleep. Lie 1, first time attending, enormous, load-bearing. Lie 2, the incomplete truth about broad interests, smaller, a door left slightly ajar rather than slammed shut. Everything else had been true. She sat up in bed and looked at the window where the light was just starting to come in pale and flat over the northern hills, and she told herself that 27 hours into a 3-day assignment was not the time to start treating a job like a puzzle she had to solve. She got dressed. She made the terrible estate coffee in her room because the estate coffee maker had one setting, and that setting was aggressively bad, and she drank it standing by the window, watching the hills go from gray to greenish gold in the early light. She thought about the seating arrangement at dinner. She thought about Clara saying whether I know the man. She thought about the way Pip had arranged himself on her side of the table. She picked up her briefing folder, tucked it under her arm, and went to find out what day 2 of the Alpha Summit had for her. Ren was already in the briefing room. This surprised her because she was 20 minutes early and had specifically arrived early to have a moment to organize herself before he got there. He was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee that smelled considerably better than hers, and Pip was on the table beside the cup, standing upright on his hind legs and examining a small pen that had apparently rolled out of Nadia's briefing folder the day before and that she had not noticed was missing. "Good morning," she said, setting her folder down across from him with more control than she felt. "Good morning," he said. Pip dropped the pen. It rolled to the edge of the table. He watched it with great interest, then looked at Nadia as if expecting her to do something about this. "How does he travel?" she asked, sitting down. Professional question. Ferret logistics were a legitimate topic of conversation. "Pocket," Ren said, "he prefers it." And the summit coordinators permitted him in the conference rooms. "I did not ask," Ren said. She looked at him, he looked back. "That is a significant oversight in your event registration," she said carefully. "Is it?" No burnt copper, he genuinely did not think it was. She decided not to pursue that line of thinking, because it implied that he was accustomed to not asking permission for things, which led back to the question of why that might be true, which she had told herself very firmly she was not going to spend this morning asking. "Today's schedule," she said, opening her folder. "Morning is the restricted mediation session for the border territory dispute, Northern Corridor versus the Southern Reach. That is where your translation support will be most active. I will be sitting at the table, not in the observer gallery. You, as an observer, will be in the gallery with the other independent attendees." He looked at the schedule she slid across the table. "I would prefer to be at the table," he said. "Observer credentials do not permit floor access in restricted sessions," she said. "I understand that," he said. Burnt copper not on those words, on the silence after them, somehow, as if the restraint he was exercising was itself a kind of statement. "I will take good notes," she said. He picked up his coffee, drank, said nothing. Pip had retrieved the pen and was now trying to roll it back toward Nadia with his nose. She watched this for a moment, then she reached out and took the pen from him. "Thank you," she said to Pip, because it seemed rude not to. Pip chittered. Ren's expression did something complicated. Just for a second, a flicker of something she could not name that moved through his face and was gone before she could catalog it. "He brought you a pen," he said. "He did. He has never done that before." She did not know what to do with that information, so she wrote the day's agenda at the top of her notepad and moved on. The restricted mediation session was held in a smaller room on the second floor, all dark wood and tall windows that let in too much cold light, the kind of room that was designed to make people feel the weight of what they were deciding. 12 seats at the table. Nadia's chair was set slightly back from the main circle, notebook open, earpiece in, ready to translate if the conversation required it. The Northern Corridor representative was a compact, careful man named Gerald Frost, who had the measured manner of someone who had been in rooms like this many times, and had learned exactly how much to show and when. The Southern Reach sent a woman named Cora Bell, who was younger than most expected, with sharp eyes and the kind of patient expression that meant she was listening to things other than the words being spoken. Nadia liked Cora Bell immediately. The dispute was territorial, it always was. A strip of land along the eastern slope of the Thornback Range had been in active contention for 6 years. 3 previous summits had produced agreements that held for a year, 2 years, 14 months, and then frayed. The underlying issue was not the land itself but what was under it: mineral rights, water access, and at a level that no one would say directly but everyone knew, a question of dominance that had nothing to do with legal boundary lines. Nadia translated when the discussion moved into the formal treaty language. which was an older dialect that both sides had agreed to use because it was nobody's native tongue, and therefore nobody had a home advantage in it. She was good at this. She slipped into the work the way she always did, fully present, the personal parts of her mind set aside, just the words and their meanings and the gap between what was said and what was meant. 3 times during the morning session she felt the familiar prickle of copper, not tasted, exactly, because she was not the one being lied to, but sensed in the way she sometimes sensed it in rooms with many speakers, a faint background radiation of untruth that told her the stated positions were not the real positions. Gerald Frost's opening statement contained 2 specific claims about historical boundary markers that registered as false. Cora Bell's response was entirely true, which told Nadia something about her negotiating strategy. She wrote it all down in her private shorthand. This was not part of her official role. She had never shared this information with anyone. She had, over 14 summits, watched disputes that should have resolved spiral instead, because the mediators were working with false data that she could have corrected in 30 seconds. She had always said nothing. She was a translator, not a lie detector, not a political operative. Her job was language. At the lunch recess, she stepped out into the corridor and found Ren waiting. He had been in the observer gallery the entire morning. She had not looked up at the gallery once. She had been professional about that, but she felt the fact of his presence there in the particular way she sometimes felt things she was not supposed to feel. "How did it go?" he asked. "The session is proceeding as expected," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "That is an impressively uninformative answer," he said. She almost smiled. She stopped herself. "It is the answer I am authorized to give observers regarding restricted sessions," she said. "And the answer you would give if you were not restricted." She looked at him. "Are you asking me to breach session confidentiality?" "No," he said, "entirely true. I am asking whether there is a gap between those 2 answers." She thought about Gerald Frost and his false boundary markers. She thought about the 6-year dispute and the 14-month peace agreements and the strip of land along the eastern slope that nobody actually wanted for the reasons they said they wanted it. "The gap exists in most negotiations," she said carefully. He nodded once slowly, the way someone nods when they have learned something they already suspected. Pip appeared at the collar of his jacket, looked at Nadia and made his sound. "He is doing that thing again," Nadia said. "What thing?" "The sound. He makes it specifically when he looks at me." Ren glanced at Pip. Something moved between them, not a word, not a signal she could name, but a very specific silence. "He is paying attention to you," Ren said. "Why?" "I do not know," he said. She tasted nothing, that was the truth. The afternoon session broke down. Not catastrophically, not shouting, not anyone leaving the room. The breakdown was quieter than that. Cora Bell asked a direct question about the original 1987 boundary survey. Gerald Frost gave an answer that made Nadia's copper sense flare so strongly she had to press her pen hard against her notepad to keep her expression neutral. And then Cora Bell said, very politely, that she would need to see the original documentation before the discussion could continue. Gerald Frost said the documentation was in review. Nadia wrote in her private shorthand, "No such documentation or it contradicts his claim." The session chair called a short recess. In the 3 minutes of shuffling and low conversation that followed, Nadia became aware that someone had moved into the room. She turned to look at the door. It was Ren. He was not supposed to be in the room. The observer gallery had a separate entrance. He was somehow in the actual session room, standing near the back wall, and the 2 summit staff members who should theoretically have questioned this were not looking at him. He looked at Nadia. She looked at him. She looked at the staff members, then back at him. He raised one eyebrow fractionally. She turned back to her notepad and wrote nothing for approximately 30 seconds while she processed what had just happened. The session reconvened. Gerald Frost continued. Cora Bell's patient expression got slightly more patient in the way that meant she was recalculating. Nadia translated. She did her job. At the back of the room, Ren Voss stood against the wall with Pip invisible in his pocket, and listened to a restricted session he had no credential to be in, and nobody told him to leave. At dinner she sat beside Clara again. The elderly observer had a way of looking at a room that reminded Nadia of herself, the particular quality of attention that comes from watching carefully for a very long time, and having learned that most things reveal themselves if you wait. He was in the session room this afternoon, Nadia said quietly between courses. She did not specify who. Clara picked up her fork. Yes, she said. Staff did not remove him. No, Clara agreed. That is irregular. Extraordinarily, Clara said. Nadia drank some water. You know who he is, she said. Not quite a question. Clara was quiet for a moment. She set her fork down, patted the corner of her mouth with her napkin and said very quietly, I know what he is not. What is he not? A council delegate, Clara said. Independent observer. I have been attending these summits for 31 years. Every independent observer in that room is exactly what their credential says. Every one, she paused, except the one with the ferret. Nadia said nothing. You have noticed, Clara said. It was not a question. I notice many things, Nadia said. It is part of the job. Clara gave her a look that was kind and completely unconvinced. The job asks you to translate. What you do goes somewhat beyond that. Nadia looked at her plate. I translate what is useful, she said. Clara returned to her food. Be careful, she said, not threatening, genuinely concerned in the low, even tone of someone who had seen many things and was offering the distilled result. Whatever he is protecting himself from knowing, that uncertainty may be valuable to him. Nadia thought about that for the rest of dinner. She thought about it while she reviewed her notes for the morning. She thought about it while she brushed her teeth and changed and turned off the light. Whatever he is protecting himself from knowing. Not protecting others from knowing about him. Protecting himself from knowing. What did that mean? She lay in the dark and ran the sentence through her mind several more times. It did not clarify. Clara was the kind of woman who said things in layers, where the surface meaning was clear but the actual meaning required time. She turned onto her side and stared at the wall. She thought about Pip bringing her the pen. She thought about being told she was the first person Pip had ever done that for. She thought about a man who lied rarely, specifically, and with the precision of someone who knew exactly which truths he was keeping back and why. She thought about the copper taste of first time, the enormity of that particular lie. First-time attendee, said so easily with no visible discomfort, the way a person says a lie they have told so many times it has worn smooth. How many times had he been here before? And what did it mean that he kept coming back, or whatever the shape of the truth behind that lie was, in a disguise built from deliberately ordinary credentials? She sat up. She turned the light on. She opened her notebook to the private shorthand page and looked at everything she had written in 2 days. Then she closed it, put it in her bag, turned the light off, and lay back down. She was a translator. Her job was language. She fell asleep telling herself that with considerable conviction and zero success. The morning brought an unexpected scheduling change. The third breakout session had been moved to the main hall due to a facilities issue on the 3rd floor, which meant the session that had been relatively private was now being held in a much more visible space, with the full attendee roster present. Nadia arrived early to verify her positioning. Ren was already there. He was standing near the window at the far side of the room with a cup of coffee that was somehow, again, considerably better than anything the estate catering had produced at the official stations, and Pip was perched on his shoulder with his small front paws on Ren's collarbone looking out at the room, as though he was the one assessing the strategic layout. She crossed the room. The session moved, she said. I saw the notice, he said. It means the format changes. Open floor means more speakers, faster pace. My translation load goes up significantly. She paused. And the border dispute parties will be in the same room as the full assembly. Something in his face sharpened. Who authorized the room change? She looked at him, the facilities coordinator. Who requested it? She had not asked that question. She felt briefly annoyed with herself for not asking it. I can find out, she said. He was already looking across the room to where Gerald Frost had just entered. No night, he said. Burnt copper, a thick, deliberate cloud of it. He already knew who had requested the room change, and he was telling her it was unnecessary for her to find out, and that statement was a lie. He wanted her to not look into it. She looked directly at Gerald Frost. Frost was speaking to one of his delegation members. He looked calm. He looked like someone who had gotten something arranged and was now simply waiting for the result. She filed that away. Pip made the sound, the one specifically directed at her. She looked at the ferret. The ferret looked at the doorway that Gerald Frost had just come through. "Pip," she said quietly. The ferret turned to look at her. "I see it," she said. She was not sure whether she was talking to the ferret or to herself. But something told her, the copper sense, the careful attention she had spent her whole life honing, that she was no longer the only person in this room keeping a detailed private record of things that were not quite what they appeared to be. And that the man standing beside her with the ferret on his shoulder was keeping a record that was significantly longer than hers. She had started keeping 2 notebooks. One was official, translation notes, session summaries, procedural records, the kind of documentation that the Neutral Translators Guild expected from every assignment. Clean, professional, organized by session number and date. She could hand it to Gloria or any summit coordinator at any moment, and it would show exactly the work she was being paid to do. The second notebook was private. It was a small green one she had bought 3 summits ago and refilled every time because the size fit in her jacket pocket, and in it she kept the things she could not put in the official record. Not fabrications, she had never fabricated anything in her life, just observations. The kind that required context to be useful and the kind of context that did not belong in a professional transcript. By the morning of day 3, the private notebook had more writing in it than any previous summit. She sat in the early morning light, the terrible estate coffee at her elbow, and read back through what she had written. Gerald Frost had requested the room change. She had found this out through a conversation with one of the facility's staff that she had conducted under the guise of confirming the audio setup for her translation equipment. The facility's coordinator had mentioned it without thinking. Room change request had come through at 11 the previous night, after the afternoon session, under Gerald Frost's letterhead. Why move an intimate mediation to an open-floor session? The answer was not complicated once you thought about it. Cora Bell had asked to see original documentation. That documentation did not support Gerald Frost's position. In a private session with a trained mediator, that gap would be pursued until it resolved. In a busy open-floor session with 60 voices and a translator stretched thin, it would get buried. She had written, Frost moved the room to obscure the documentation question. Below that, Ren knew, told me not to look into it, lied about not needing to. Why? Below that, Pip looked at the door Frost came through. She had drawn a small box around that last line, the way she sometimes marked things that she did not know what to do with yet. She closed the notebook, put it in her pocket, and went to find the day. The main hall session was everything she had anticipated. Loud, overlapping, structured on the surface and chaotic 2 layers down. Nadia worked steadily. She was good at this, good at holding multiple threads simultaneously, at tracking who was speaking and what the literal meaning was, and what the intended meaning was, and the gap between them. Ren sat in the observer gallery. She did not look at the gallery, she was professional. But she was aware of his presence with the same peripheral accuracy. She was always aware of things that mattered without being able to explain why they mattered. When Cora Bell tried, for the second time, to raise the documentation question, Gerald Frost did not object. He simply shifted the conversation with a reference to a procedural point that required the session chair's attention, and by the time the chair had handled it, the thread had been cleanly severed and 3 new speakers had filled the space. Nadia wrote it down. She had stopped asking herself why she was writing things down that were not her responsibility. She had been doing that for 14 summits, and she was not going to figure out the answer this morning. At the recess, she stepped into the corridor and immediately walked directly into the edge of the water station table that had been moved 8 inches from its usual position, caught herself on the wall, and stood there for a moment processing the mild indignity of it. The table was moved, said a voice beside her. I noticed, she said. Ren was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and the expression of someone who had been standing there for a while. Pip's head was visible at the collar. The documentation question, she said, turning to face him. Professional, direct, she had decided on directness. He looked at her without changing his expression. Frost moved the room to bury it, she said. A pause, not the pause of someone calculating an answer, the pause of someone who already has the answer and is deciding how much of it to give. Yes, he said. One word, no copper, true. You knew last night, she said. Yes. You told me not to look into it. I did. And you lied when you said I did not need to. The longest pause yet. Yes, he said. Burnt copper on that one was entirely absent. He was acknowledging the lie without lying about having lied. That was a very specific kind of honesty, and it made her feel slightly off balance. Why'd she asked. He looked at her for a long moment. Pip made the sound. Because you looking into it would have been visible, he said. And visibility, right now, serves Gerald Frost more than it serves Cora Bell. She thought about that. You are managing the information flow, she said. Someone needs to, he said. Burnt copper, not a big one, a careful, precise one. That was not the complete reason. He was managing information flow, that part was true, but that was not why he had told her not to look. There was another reason, and he was keeping it back. What is the rest of it? She asked. He looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes, a kind of reassessment, the small recalibration of someone who has been looked at and found that the person looking is seeing more than expected. What rest? He said. Burnt copper, heavier now. He knew exactly what the rest was. She held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she looked away, because she was professional and this was still, technically, a job. The afternoon session begins in 15 minutes, she said. I need to review my notes. She went back into the hall. She was almost certain he watched her go. The afternoon was harder. Not professionally. Professionally she was fine, she was always fine. She had been doing this long enough that even a difficult session with overlapping speakers and a procedural dispute about floor order ran cleanly through her. Language was a machine she understood. It did not surprise her. What was hard was the thing she was not paying attention to, which took considerably more energy than paying attention to it would have. At 3:15, a senior delegate from the Western Ridge made a statement about historical migration rights that contained 4 separate factual inaccuracies. They were specific inaccuracies, not vague, not strategic, but deliberately introduced errors about dates and documented agreements that someone who had read the right sources would know were wrong. The copper taste hit her in sequence, 4 distinct spikes one after the other as each false claim landed. She translated accurately. Her job was to render the words, not evaluate them. But she wrote it all down. After the session in the corridor heading toward the pre-dinner break, a hand on her arm, light, she turned. It was Cora Bell. Miss Vance, Cora said. She had intelligent eyes and a mouth that seemed designed for saying uncomfortable things gracefully. You are the independent translator for the Observer track, yes. Correct, Nadia said. The one assigned to Delegate Voss. Yes. Cora glanced over her shoulder. Not nervously, she did not seem like someone who got nervous. Carefully. I have a question, Cora said, and I understand if it falls outside your scope. Nadia waited. In the session this afternoon, Cora said, there were claims made about the 1987 Eastern Agreement. I have read that agreement multiple times. The claims did not match my reading. Nadia said nothing. A neutral translator's ear is well trained, Cora said. I wondered if you heard any inconsistency. It was a careful word, inconsistency. Not lie, not false claim, inconsistency. Nadia thought about her 2 notebooks, the official one and the green private one. She thought about 14 summits, and every time she had sat in a room with the copper taste on her tongue and done her job and not done the other thing. My role is translation, she said. I render what is said as accurately as possible. Cora nodded slowly. Of course, she said. She started to turn away. The 1987 agreement, Nadia said. Cora stopped. Has a documented secondary appendix, Nadia said, filed separately from the main text. The Summit archive holds a copy. Room 12, basement level, open to delegates during the hours listed on the access schedule. Cora looked at her, a long look, the kind that recalculates. "Thank you," Cora said. Her voice was very even. "I am just familiar with the archive," Nadia said. "It is useful for translators to know where source documents are held." Cora walked away. Nadia stood in the corridor for a moment. She had not lied. She had not disclosed session content. She had told a delegate the location of a public archive document that was available to anyone with the right access credentials. She had not done anything wrong. She put her hands in her pockets and went to change for dinner. Dinner was almost over before Ren said something unexpected. She was not sitting near him. The table arrangements had shifted for the final evening, the last night before the closing ceremony, and he was 3 seats down and across, which was far enough that conversation required effort but close enough that she could see his expression when the light caught it right. He was quiet through most of the meal, attentive to the person beside him, appropriately social in the way of someone who knew exactly how much social was expected and gave precisely that amount, no more. At the dessert course, he looked across the table at her. She was mid-sentence with the trade liaison on her left, and managed to hold the sentence together while registering the fact of his attention, which she considered a personal achievement. After dinner, in the corridor, he fell into step beside her. "You told her about the archive," he said. She looked at him. "How do you know that?" "Cora Bell went to the basement archive at 4:47, he said. "She was in there for 31 minutes. She stopped walking. Were you watching her schedule?" "I was watching the building," he said. Burnt copper, not on that sentence. That sentence was true. On what it implied, which was that watching the building was a normal and reasonable thing for him to do, which it was not. "That is not standard observer behavior," she said. "No," he agreed. "Why are you watching the building?" He looked at her. The corridor was empty. The estate sounds, distant voices, someone's heels on a hard floor, the wind against the old stone walls filled the silence around them. "There are people attending this summit who did not come for the summit," he said. "No copper, every word true." "Frost," she said. "Frost is one," he said. "There are others." "Others who?" "Who want a specific outcome," he said. "Not the outcome the summit was called to produce, a different one." She looked at him. The copper was absent. He was telling her the truth. "And you," she said, "what outcome did you come for?" A pause, long enough to register. "The right one," he said. The copper sat on the edge of that answer like a suggestion, not fully present, not fully absent. More like the aftertaste of something that had been more complicated before it was distilled into 3 words. "That is also not a council observer's role," she said. "No," he said, "it is not." He said it with the tone of someone who knows exactly what their role is and has chosen not to explain it. Pip had been quiet in the pocket all evening. Now he appeared at the collar, looked at Nadia, and then at the corridor ahead and chittered once. "He wants you to keep walking," Ren said. "Does he manage your social interactions often?" she asked. "More than you would expect," he said. She almost laughed. She stopped it, but not quite completely. A small sound escaped that she hoped was not identifiable as the beginning of a laugh. Ren's expression shifted, not a smile exactly. Something quieter than that, something she did not have a name for and was not going to look for right now. "Good night, Miss Vance," he said. "Good night," she said. She walked back to her room. She opened the green notebook. She wrote 3 lines, then she sat looking at them for a while. The first line, "He is watching the building because something here is wrong." The second line, "He already knows what it is." The third line, "He is telling me because he wants me to know, or because he needs me to know, and those are very different reasons." She put the pen down. She looked at the box she had drawn around Pip, looked at the door. Frost came through. The ferret had looked at the door before Frost came through it, not after, before. She drew a second box around the first one. Then she went to sleep with the taste of something that was not quite copper, and not quite trust, sitting somewhere in the back of her throat. Morning came in cold and gray. The closing ceremony was at 10. She had 2 hours. She used the first hour to go to the basement archive. Room 12 was small and smelled of old paper, and the specific damp of stone that never fully dried. The archive attendant, a young man named Oliver who appeared to live primarily on biscuits and strong tea, and had the slightly glazed look of someone who had spent the last 3 days managing access requests from over 100 delegates, looked up when she came in. "Translator Vance," he said. "I was here 2 days ago," she said. "You may remember. You were asking about the session audio records," he said. "Good memory. What can I help you with today?" "The 1987 Eastern Agreement," she said. "Secondary appendix." He blinked. "That is the second request for that document in 12 hours. "I know," she said. He got up without further comment and went to the back shelves. She sat at the reading table and looked at the room while she waited. Old estates always had rooms like this, rooms that held the weight of previous decisions. She had developed a particular feeling for them over 14 summits. Not superstition, she was not superstitious. Just the awareness that rooms accumulated things that happened in them and that the accumulation was sometimes relevant. Oliver came back with a slim folder. "Secondary Appendix 1987 Eastern Agreement," he said. "Filed separately as you said, accessed twice previously, once 3 years ago by a research team, once," he checked the access log, "once 9 days ago." She looked up. 9 days ago. "A council representative," Oliver said, "senior level. The access request was processed through the formal credentials channel." She held out her hand for the folder. He gave it to her. She read the appendix. It took 8 minutes, then she read it again. The appendix directly contradicted 4 of the 5 specific claims Gerald Frost had made in yesterday's session. Not ambiguously, directly, with dates and boundary coordinates and 2 separate witness signatures. She sat with that for a moment. Someone had accessed this document 9 days ago, before the summit began. Someone who had come here knowing that this document existed and what it contained and how it related to the claims that were going to be made in this week's sessions. Someone who had credentials sufficient to access the restricted archive. A council representative, senior level. She closed the folder. She returned it to Oliver. She thanked him. She went back up the stairs and stood in the first-floor corridor for exactly 90 seconds while she thought about what she had just learned. Then she went to find Ren. He was in the small sitting room off the East Hall, which was supposed to be a quiet reading space, and which he appeared to have adopted as his unofficial headquarters. She had seen him in it at 3 separate points over the past 3 days. Pip was on the arm of the chair beside him. He had a folder on his knee. She sat down across from him without waiting to be invited. "Someone accessed the secondary appendix 9 days ago," she said, "before the summit, council-level credentials." He looked at her. He did not look surprised. "You already knew," she said. "Yes," he said. "Who was it?" He closed his folder, set it on the side table, looked at her with the particular attention she had catalogued over 3 days, the kind that saw more than it showed. "It was me," he said. No copper, none, every syllable clear. She looked at him. He looked back. The fire in the small sitting room made a sound. Pip turned his head toward the window. "You came here knowing what Frost was going to say," she said. "Yes." "You came knowing the documentation that would contradict it." "Yes." "And your role here," she stopped. "Your role is not observer or council delegate. Whatever credentials you are using, they are accurate enough that an archive attendant takes them at face value, but the role itself is not what you say it is." He was quiet. She thought about Clara. Whether I know the man, that remains to be seen. She thought about the estate staff giving him space without being asked. She thought about first time and how large that lie had been, and how specifically it had been shaped, not a lie about who he was, but about how many times he had been here. He had been here before. Many times, her copper sense told her. This was not the first summit Ren Voss had attended in disguise. She thought about a man who watched the building, who arrived knowing which documents existed and what they said, who lied about nothing except the one specific fact that would give him away immediately to anyone looking. A man who came to a summit that was ostensibly beneath his rank, wearing credentials that were real but insufficient, in order to quietly ensure the right outcome. She felt something shift in her chest, not dramatically. Just the particular internal movement that came when something she had been holding at arm's length for 3 days settled into the space it had been waiting to occupy. "Who are you?" she said. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. He held her gaze. Pip stood up on the chair arm and looked at her with his bright, patient eyes. And Ren Voss opened his mouth. And then the door opened, and one of the summit coordinators stepped in with an apologetic look and a tablet, and said that the closing ceremony was beginning in 20 minutes, and the observer positions needed to be confirmed. Ren closed his mouth. He picked up his folder, he stood, he straightened his jacket. "We should go," he said. Burnt copper, a specific, deliberate, considered copper. He was not going to answer that question here. He had just chosen not to answer it. And he knew that she knew that. She stood up and followed him out of the room with Pip's eyes on her back, and the question still in the air, and 20 minutes before the end of the only 3 days, she was assigned to be near this man, and the taste of something unsaid sitting precisely where the copper usually did. The closing ceremony lasted 1 hour and 14 minutes. Nadia had attended enough of them to know they were not designed for information. They were designed for the appearance of resolution, formal statements read from prepared cards, a series of handshakes that meant nothing legally but meant everything politically, a photographer from the summit office who would produce images later distributed to the represented packs as evidence that something had been accomplished. She stood at her position, slightly behind the neutral observer section, translation equipment ready, notebook open, and did her job while spending a significant portion of her attention on the question that was still hanging unanswered in the air of the small sitting room, where a closing door had intervened at the precise wrong moment. Cora Bell, at the ceremonial table, signed her name to the closing statement with the focused calm of someone who had gotten something important done in a basement archive the previous evening, and was now processing what to do with it. Gerald Frost signed his name to the same document with the expression of someone who had not yet realized that the document he was signing might mean something different from what he thought it did. Ren Voss stood in the observer section and watched all of it with no expression at all. Pip was in the pocket, quiet. The ceremony ended with a light reception, tea and small food items on tables near the tall windows. The kind of event where everyone said goodbye in the terms appropriate to the relationship they were publicly presenting, and then did the real goodbyes somewhere else. Nadia collected her translation equipment, shook hands with the 2 other neutral translators she had worked alongside, and found a quiet position near the window to begin her mental debrief. She had 2 hours before the car service she had arranged would take her back to the city. She was not sure what she expected to happen in those 2 hours. What happened was nothing for approximately 35 minutes. Then Cora Bell appeared beside her. "Miss Vance," she said. She had a small cup of tea and the expression of someone who had come with something specific to say. "I want to thank you for the archive reference," Nadia said. "That is standard translator knowledge." "For more than that," Cora said. "What I found in that appendix," she paused, choosing her words, "it changes the legal position of 3 claims that Frost's delegation has been asserting for 6 years. The summit chair is already aware. The documentation has been entered into the official record." Nadia felt something settle quietly in her chest. Not triumph, she was not built for triumph. Just the small, steady satisfaction of something being correct that had been incorrect for too long. "That is good news for the Southern Reach," she said. "It is good news for everyone who wanted an honest outcome," Cora said. Then, more quietly, including whoever made sure that document was still accessible when it needed to be. Nadia looked at her. Cora's expression was careful and specific. "The archive log shows someone accessed that appendix 9 days ago," Cora said. "Ensured it was filed, cross-referenced, and locatable by any credentialed party who thought to look." Nadia said nothing. "I wondered," Cora said, "whether you had any interest in passing along my thanks to whomever that was." A long pause. "If the opportunity presented itself," Nadia said. Cora nodded. "Good," she said. She drank her tea. "Enjoy the rest of your morning, Miss Vance." She walked away. Nadia turned back to the window and looked at the northern hills in the thin morning light, and thought about a man who came to summits in disguise with archive research already done, who watched buildings and managed information, and lied about one thing specifically and nothing else, who prepared the ground, then stepped back and let it grow. She thought about who did that, what kind of person arranged outcomes without appearing to. She thought about the seating at the first night's dinner. She thought about staff who moved without being told. She thought about first time. She was in the entrance hall, bag over her shoulder, waiting for her car when she heard the sound. The specific chitter, the pip sound, the one directed at her. She turned. Ren was coming down the main staircase. He had changed travel clothes now dark and plain, a coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent but was cut to look like it did not. Pip was on his shoulder. He came directly toward her. "Your transport is arranged?" he asked. 2 o'clock, she said. "Yours?" "Shortly," he said. They stood in the entrance hall while other departing guests moved around them. The organized chaos of a summit dissolving, luggage, farewells, the particular efficiency of people who have been at a formal event for 3 days and are ready to be done with it. "The question I asked," she said, not carefully. She had decided on the stairs that she was done with careful. "In the sitting room, you were going to answer it." He looked at her. Was I? Burnt copper, he was not sure. He had been about to answer and then the coordinator had come in, and now he was not sure whether he would have answered or deflected. "I am asking again," she said. "I know," he said. "Who are you?" He looked at her for a long time, long enough that she could see him deciding something, not what to say, she thought, whether to say it. Pip put his small paw on Ren's jaw and pushed, a tiny, deliberate shove. The ferret looked at Nadia. Ren's expression shifted. Something in it became not soft exactly, less armored, the very particular look of someone who has held a thing back for a long time and has just been reminded by a ferret that they are tired of holding it. "Not here," he said. She looked at the entrance hall full of departing guests. "No," she agreed. "There is a garden on the east side," he said. "The staff entrance gate, 5 minutes." He walked away before she could agree or disagree. She looked at her watch. She had 1 hour and 50 minutes before her car. She went to the east garden. It was a small space, more functional than decorative, a walled area with gravel paths and some winterbear bushes and a stone bench that had seen better decades. The estate must have used it as a staff break area at some point. It was entirely private. He was already there. Pip was on the bench beside him, facing the gate, as though keeping watch. She sat down on the bench, not close. There was space between them, the width of 2 people who had not quite decided what they were to each other, but had established that they were something. "I have attended this summit," he said, 7 times. 7, the live first time, had covered 7 previous visits. "In different roles," she said, not a question. "Different names," he said, "different credentials. The architecture of each identity is real enough to survive scrutiny from a distance." She sat with that. Why? "Because the summit produces outcomes that affect a great many people," he said, "and because the kind of influence that actually works in rooms like this is not the kind that comes with a nameplate at the table. No copper on any of it. You make the ground," she said, echoing what she had been thinking in the entrance hall, "then you step back." He looked at her, a look she could not translate, which was not something that happened to her often. "Where does the authority to do that come from?" she asked. Long pause. "You know the answer," he said. She looked at him, at the coat that fit too well, at the stillness that was not trained patience but inherent, at the way the space around him organized itself. She thought about Cora Bell and whoever made sure that document was still accessible. She thought about staff who did not question him. She thought about 7 summits under different names. She thought about the kind of man who went to this much trouble, over this many years, to ensure that rooms full of people got to the right decision. The answer arrived quietly, without drama, just sat down in her mind and looked at her. "Ren Aldrich Voss," she said. His jaw tightened, almost nothing. She would have missed it if she had not been watching. "The last summit's public record lists the Alpha King as in residence at the Northern Fortress," she said, "unavailable for external attendance." That record is accurate, he said. And yet, he agreed. No copper anywhere in this conversation. Every single word was true. She looked at him. He was the Alpha King. She had been sitting across a breakfast table from the Alpha King for 3 days and making terrible estate coffee notes and counting his lies and arguing with him about observer credentials. She thought about the seating arrangement at the first dinner, 2 seats from the head. She thought about nobody telling him to leave the restricted session. She thought about Pip choosing her out of a room of 114 people and bringing her a pen. She should have been frightened. She considered whether she was frightened and determined that she was not. She was settled somehow, the way things sometimes felt when a piece of information that had been in the wrong drawer your whole life finally went to the right one. "Why are you telling me?" she asked. He looked at his hands, then out at the winter garden, then at her. "Because you already know," he said. She almost said, "I guessed." But she stopped herself, because that was not entirely what he meant, and she knew it. "You lied to everyone in that building," she said. "Every single person except me." He said nothing. "You did not lie to me about anything that mattered," she said. "You lied about first time, one lie, one specific targeted lie about attendance history, everything else." "Everything else I said to you was true," he said. "No copper." "Why?" she said. He turned to look at her, full attention, no deflection. "You already know that too," he said. She did not know that. She thought she might, somewhere underneath the professional composure she had been maintaining for 3 days. But knowing a thing under the surface, and knowing it in the place where you could say it out loud, were different locations. "That is not an answer," she said. "No," he said, "it is not." Pip made the sound, louder this time, insistent. Wren looked at the ferret. Something passed between them, that thing she had noticed since the first morning, the communication that had no words. "I will be honest with you," Wren said. "It is not something I do easily or often." "I know," she said. She could not explain how she knew, she just did. "I noticed you on the first evening," he said, "after the wine glasses." "Most people notice someone who spills wine on them," she said. "Not the wine," he said. "The way you stayed composed, the way you were not afraid of me. Most people are afraid of me, even when they do not know who I am." She thought about first time and standing in the wreckage of 9 glasses and the specific quality of his presence, and how she had felt not afraid. Alert, there was a difference. "I am afraid of very little," she said. "I know," he said. She looked at him. "You watched me." "Yes, during the sessions, when I was translating." "You do not translate," he said. "You listen. The translating is what you do with your hands, the listening is what you do with everything else." She sat with that for a long time. It was the most accurate description of herself she had ever heard from someone who had known her for 3 days. "You have an ability," he said, very quietly. "I do not know what it is. But I know it is not standard." The air changed, just slightly, the way it changed when someone asked the question she had spent her entire adult life managing. "I am a translator," she said. "Yes," he said, "and you are something else. And that something else is why you are the only person in that building I did not manage the information for." He paused. It would not have worked. She looked at him. He looked back. "Try," she said. "Excuse me." "Lie to me," she said. "Say something false." He was quiet for a moment. "You are very good at your job," he said. "No copper." "That was not a lie," she said. "Try something false." He thought about it. She watched him think about it, the specific work of choosing something untrue. "The sky is green," he said. "Burnt copper." Clean and simple and absolutely present. She let it sit on her tongue for a moment. "I can taste them," she said. "False statements. There is a sensation specific like copper. It has been there my entire life." The garden was very quiet. He did not look shocked. He looked satisfied, the way someone looks when a theory they have been running for 3 days turns out to be correct. "That is why you are always 2 seconds ahead of the room," he said. "I cannot control it," she said. "It just comes." "Does it come from everyone?" "Everyone who tells an untruth within a certain range of me," she said. The strength varies with the size and the intent of the lie. And from me. She looked at him. Twice, she said, in 3 days, both times deliberate. Both times specific. He nodded slowly. First time, she said, and one other. The other, he said, was when I told you it was not necessary to look into the room change. I was protecting you from being visible in something that could have made you a target. No copper truth. She felt something loosen in her chest, not dramatically, just the small release of a tension she had not known she was holding. You lied to keep me out of something dangerous, she said. Yes, without telling me it was dangerous. Yes, That is, she stopped. It was irritating. It was also in the context of what she now knew about who he was and what he had been doing for 7 summits and what was actually at stake in those rooms. It was also reasonable. She did not want it to be reasonable. It was a judgment call, he said. I judged incorrectly. You had already found most of it yourself. I usually do, she said. He almost smiled. It was the same thing that had happened at the breakfast table on day 2, the flicker of something that resolved before it became visible. But this time she was closer, and she saw more of it. You went to the archive, he said. I did. Oliver told you about the 9-day prior access. He did. And you worked the rest out from there. Most of it, she said. I still do not entirely understand why you came personally. For 7 summits, the Alpha King's court has resources you could send. I could send people, he said. I have sent people. Outcomes produced by people I send are outcomes I did not see built. I do not sign my name to outcomes I have not seen built. She looked at him. That is why you have no intermediaries, she said. At all. You come yourself in disguise and watch every session and prepare the ground and make sure the outcomes are correct. Yes, he said. For 7 summits. Yes. That is an extraordinary amount of personal work for the Alpha King, she said. It is, he said. I prefer it. Why? The longest pause of the entire conversation. Because authority that does not look at its own consequences stops being authority, he said. It becomes performance. I refuse to perform. No copper, not a single molecule of it. She sat in the winter garden with the stone bench cold under her and the bare bushes rattling faintly, and the man who was the Alpha King sitting close enough that she could see the specific gray in his dark eyes. And she felt, for the first time in 3 days, and possibly for the first time in considerably longer than that, completely at rest. Not safe, rest was not the same as safe. Just the particular calm of sitting across from someone who had not lied to her about anything that mattered. I told you something I have not told anyone, she said, about the ability. I know, he said. I need you to understand what that means. I think I do, he said. No, she said, you understand it theoretically. I have never told a single person in my entire life, not my parents. Not my colleagues, not anyone. He looked at her. Why me, he said. She thought about it for a moment. She owed him the real answer. Because you did not lie to me, she said. In 3 days of watching a man who lies to everyone for genuinely good reasons, you did not lie to me, and I have never been in a room with a person that I could say that about. He said nothing. Pip made the sound very quietly, almost to himself. Wren reached up and put one finger against the ferret's back, just resting, the automatic comfort of someone very familiar with the small animal. I have a car arranged, he said finally. It leaves at 2:30. I have one at 2, she said. Cancel it, he said. She looked at him. There is more to say, he said. I would like to say it without the entrance hall and the event photographer in range. She thought about her car, her apartment, her next assignment which started on Monday. She thought about 3 days of copper and truth and a ferret that brought her a pen. Where is your car going? She asked. North, he said. She looked at the northern hills beyond the garden wall, gray-green and enormous in the cold light. I have a Monday appointment, she said. I know, he said. North is not permanent. North is 2 days if you want 2 days. Burnt copper absent. What happens in 2 days? She asked. More honesty than you have probably received in your entire life, he said. Which, given your ability, I imagine has been a fairly extended drought. She looked at him. He was right, he was absolutely right. And the part of her that had been waiting her entire life to sit in a room where the copper did not come felt that like a door opening somewhere in her chest. She picked up her bag. I need to call my coordinator, she said. She thought she saw, very briefly, something in his expression that was relief. Pip chittered. She was almost entirely sure that was approval. The car was not what she expected. She had cancelled her 2 o'clock and made the call to her coordinator with a cover story about extended documentation responsibilities, which was technically true in the loosest possible reading of the word documentation, and had met Wren at the East Gate at 2:20 with her bag repacked and a specific internal decision to stop cataloging every item of information as either expected or not expected. Because clearly her expectations were running at approximately 50% accuracy in the presence of this particular person. The car was an ordinary black vehicle, comfortable but not elaborate, no emblems, no flags, no indication of anything other than a car that drove efficiently and quietly and belonged to whoever had requested it. The driver's name, she learned after she was settled in the back and Wren had closed the door, was Lawrence. He was somewhere in his 60s, had the square, steady presence of someone who had driven important people for a long time and had developed a very complete ability to not hear what happened in the back seat. Lawrence said good afternoon and pulled out of the estate grounds without asking for directions. He already knew where they were going. Pip was on Wren's knee, examining the car door handle with focused interest. He has never understood latches, Wren said. He was watching the estate gates close behind them in the side mirror. He knows they open things, he cannot find the mechanism. He is very intelligent for an animal, Nadia said. He is very intelligent for most things, Wren said. He has a better read on people than anyone I have employed, including people whose job description includes reading people. What does he read? She asked. Intent, Wren said. Whether someone means what they say, whether they are operating from good faith or from positioning. He paused. He has been extraordinarily interested in you since the first evening. I know, she said, I noticed. He has never brought someone a pen before, Wren said. He steals pens routinely, he has never given one back. She looked at Pip. Pip was now sitting on the window sill, watching the countryside pass with the intense attention of an animal who found motion deeply fascinating. What does it mean? She asked. The giving back. Wren thought about it. I think it means he trusts you, he gives things to people he trusts. He paused again. He has given exactly one other person something in 4 years, a staff member at the Northern Fortress who had just returned from a very long absence. He brought her a small stone from the garden. What happened to her? Nadia asked. She is still there, he said. She runs the household. She filed that away. The countryside moved past. The northern hills settled around them, large and unhurried. The road began to climb. Tell me about the ability, he said, not demanding, asking. There was a significant difference and she registered it. What do you want to know? Everything you know, he said. She had never described it completely to anyone. She had never been asked to describe it completely, because she had never told anyone it existed. She discovered, sitting in the back of a very quiet car going north, that she had an enormous amount to say about it. It started when I was very young, she said. I did not understand what it was at first. I thought everyone had it. The taste, it comes on the back of the tongue toward the throat, like copper, like a coin in your mouth. Children do not usually question the things that happen in their bodies. I thought it was normal. When did you realize it was not? He asked. I was 9, she said. A boy in my class told the teacher that I had broken the window during recess. I had not, I knew it. The teacher asked me directly and then asked him, and when he said he saw me do it, the taste was so strong I had to put my hand over my mouth. She paused. The teacher did not believe me. The taste did not help me prove anything. It just told me. And you started keeping it to yourself. That year, she said. Yes, I understood then that the ability was private information, that if people knew I could taste their lies they would either not believe me or be afraid of me. Either outcome was bad. And so you learned to use it quietly, he said. I used it quietly for 23 years, she said, until today. He was quiet for a moment. What did you do with it? He asked. Over 23 years, you must have done something with it. She thought about 14 summits, 27 smaller mediation assignments, the years in translation training where she had watched instructors teach students to read body language and tone for signs of deception, and had known that all of those signals were secondary, that the real information lived somewhere the body could not fully control. I made myself useful in rooms where truth mattered, she said. The translation work, it is legitimate. I am genuinely good at languages. But the reason I moved up quickly, the reason the guild assigns me to the high-stakes sessions, it is not only languages. They know. No, she said, they think I have excellent instincts, which is true in the way that having a compass is an excellent instinct for navigation. He looked at her. The light from the window shifted across his face as they climbed. You have been doing the work of 3 people, he said, for 23 years without telling anyone why. Yes, she said. That is, he stopped. Exhausting, she said. I was going to say brave, he said. No, copper, he meant it. She looked out the window for a moment. The hills were larger now. The sky had gone a specific shade of gray that was not stormy, just heavy, the weight of winter pressing down from above. Your turn, she said. He looked at her. You told me who you are, she said. You told me why you come to the summits, but that is a function, a role. I want to know what it is like. To be the Alpha King. To spend 7 summits in disguise, she said. 7 different names. 7 different sets of credentials. The work of creating all of that and maintaining it, and still doing the actual work of, she gestured, watching, preparing, ensuring the outcomes. He looked out his own window. The countryside moved. It is lonely, he said. No, copper, clean and simple, and the truest thing she had heard in 3 days, which was saying something because the competition was fierce. The fortress, he said, the north, it is correct for what it is. The work is significant, the decisions matter, I am fortunate to be capable of making them. He paused. But the decisions are made in a structure that, he stopped, restarted, everyone who is near me because of what I am, not who, what, the role, the position. They respond to that. And here, she said, the summits. Here in disguise people respond to what I do, what I say, how I reason, not what I am. She thought about that. And me, she said. He looked at her. You responded to me, he said. Specifically, you noticed the things that mattered, you pushed back, you asked direct questions at 8 in the morning without apology. Something in his expression shifted. You tasted my lies and said nothing until you could ask directly. That is my default mode, she said. I know, he said, I found it. He stopped. She waited. Refreshing, he said. The word landed carefully as if chosen from several. No copper, but the restraint in the choice was visible. She filed that too. Pip abandoned the window and walked across Wren's knee to her side of the seat, and sat down on the space beside her left leg, with the completeness of an animal who has made a decision. She looked down at him. He does that, Wren said. Relocates himself. Makes the decision, Wren said. He decided he liked you somewhere around the pen, I think. Once he decides, he moves. She put her hand down and let Pip sniff her fingers. He did, thoroughly, and then sat back with the satisfied expression of an animal who has confirmed what he already knew. You have something to ask me, she said to Wren. He looked at her. How do you know? You have been preparing it, she said. For 20 minutes I can see preparation. Can you taste that too? No, she said. That is just watching. I am good at watching. He was quiet for a moment. The summit is over, he said. Your assignment has concluded. You are on the way north, which is not your direction. It is my direction today, she said. Yes, he said. My question is about after today, after 2 days. She waited. I do not want to lose contact with you, he said. Very quiet, very direct, and on the back of her tongue nothing, no copper at all. The most unguarded thing he had said, and it was entirely, completely true. She sat with that for a long moment. That is a complicated sentence for a person in your position, she said. I know, he said. You are the Alpha King. I am a neutral translator employed by a guild that operates under a contractual non-alignment policy. I know, he said. My value to the guild depends on my neutrality, she said. A personal relationship with anyone in a position of pack authority. I know, he said. You keep saying you know, she said. Do you have a solution? He almost smiled again. She was close enough to see the full shape of it this time, and it was not the composed, armored expression she had catalogued for 3 days. It was something behind that, something that had not decided yet whether it was allowed out. I have a position I can offer, he said. She raised an eyebrow. The court has a need for a senior translation and liaison specialist, he said. One who works directly with the Alpha's office on high-level communications. The role requires extraordinary discretion, and he paused, a very specific set of perceptive abilities. She looked at him. You want to hire me, she said. I want you to consider whether the position interests you, he said. That is a diplomatic way of saying you want to hire me. I have been reliably informed that I am not diplomatic, he said. By whom? Several people, most recently about 4 hours ago by you. She thought about it, her apartment, her guild contract, 14 summits and the clean, steady work of languages. She thought about 3 days of sitting across from someone who had not lied to her about anything that mattered. About the exhaustion of 23 years of copper and management and saying nothing. She thought about what it would be like to work somewhere that used what she actually was. I have a Monday appointment, she said. I know, he said. I would not ask you to miss it. And I need to review the position formally, she said. Terms, scope, what disclosure of my ability would mean contractually. Of course, he said. And I need to understand what personal contact means in the context of that professional relationship, she said. Because you said personal and professional simultaneously, and those are 2 different conversations. He looked at her steadily. Yes, he said, they are. I would like to have both of them, she said, separately. Clearly. That is reasonable, he said. And in the meantime, she said, I would like to know where exactly we are going because those hills are very large and I have not packed for high altitude. The northern estate, he said, not the fortress, the lower residence, it is considerably less imposing. Is that a description or a promise? Both, he said. No copper. She leaned back in the seat. Pip was warm against her leg. The hills moved past. She thought about the first evening, and 9 wine glasses, and the burnt copper of a lie that turned out to be the smallest thing about him. She thought about Pip bringing her a pen. She thought about the small sitting room door opening at exactly the wrong moment, and then this car, and the hills going north. She thought about the most accurate description of herself she had ever heard from someone who had known her for 3 days. She thought about 23 years of keeping the ability in a room no one else was allowed into. She looked at the window. She looked at Pip. She looked at Wren, who was looking out at the hills with the specific expression of someone who has said more than they expected to and is now sitting quietly with the result of that. Wren, she said. He looked at her. The thing I said in the garden, about you being the only person in 3 days who did not lie to me about anything that mattered. Yes, he said. I want you to know, she said, that is not a small thing for me, that is an extremely large thing. Possibly the largest thing anyone has done for me, without knowing they were doing it. He held her gaze. I know, he said. No copper, the most complete, quiet, unadorned truth. She turned back to the window. They drove north. The lower northern residence turned out to be what someone who was not the Alpha King would call a very large house, and what the Alpha King apparently considered the modest option. Stone, old, set into the side of a hill with the kind of rootedness that came from being in one place for several centuries, not imposing. She had been promised not imposing, and it delivered. A woman named Agnes met them at the door. She was somewhere past 60, with the warm, no-nonsense manner of someone who had managed a household through several kings and had her own opinions about all of them, which she expressed through actions rather than words. She took Nadia's bag before Nadia had finished saying she could manage it herself, and looked at her with the focused appraisal of someone accustomed to judging who was going to stay and who was visiting. Agnes looked at Pip. Pip looked at Agnes. Then Pip left Wren's pocket and climbed directly onto Agnes's arm. Agnes looked at Wren. First time, she said, referring to Pip. Second, Wren said, with the specific precision of someone counting. Agnes looked at Nadia. Then she smiled. The smile of someone whose opinion had been confirmed and who was satisfied about it. "Room 3, she said to Nadia. "It faces the hill, the morning light is good." She carried the bag in. Nadia stood in the doorway of the lower northern residence and felt the cold air from the hill and the warmth from inside, and somewhere in between the two, the specific sensation of standing at the beginning of something that did not yet have a name. "Room 3, Ren said from behind her. "The morning light is good," she repeated. "Agnes does not offer the good room to everyone," he said. She stepped inside. Behind her, she heard him follow. And for the first time since she was 7 years old, and a neighbor's dog had not gone to live on any farm, and she had not yet understood what the copper meant, she was in a place where she did not need to manage it. She was just in a place. And the place was very quiet. And nobody was lying. She woke up before dawn. This was not unusual for her. She had been a light, early sleeper for as long as she could remember, her body apparently having decided that the most productive use of the pre-sunrise hours was thinking. She lay in the bed in room 3, which faced the hill, and looked at the ceiling while the dark outside the window went from black to deep gray. The room was plain and old and smelled of stone, and something clean she could not name. The bed was more comfortable than the estate had managed. The hill outside the window was a large, dark shape against a slightly lighter sky. She thought about the conversation in the car. She had told him about the ability, the whole of it, not just the existence but the history, the 7-year-old version of herself who thought copper was what everyone tasted, the 9-year-old who learned to keep it in a room no one could enter. She had told him things she had never said aloud, and the saying of them had felt not the relief she might have expected, something more like watching a pressure system move out. The particular quiet that comes after something that has been building for a long time finally goes. He had not reacted the way she had spent 23 years anticipating people would react. He had not been afraid of her, or fascinated in the wrong way, or immediately strategic about how to use the information. He had been attentive, the same quality of attention he gave everything. And then he had offered her a position. She turned onto her side and looked at the window. The position was real, she had no doubt about that. The Alpha's court had genuine need for the kind of work she did, and she was very good at the work, and adding the ability to the professional portfolio of someone in that role would be significant. She understood why he had asked. She also understood that the asking was not only professional. He had said he did not want to lose contact. He had said it with no copper and no decoration, and she had been sitting in a moving car close enough to see his face when he said it. And what she had seen was the expression of someone who did not say personal things easily, said this one anyway, and was sitting with the result of that with considerably less composure than they would have preferred. She had not responded to the personal part. She had redirected to the professional conversation, because she was good at that, because it was easier to hold the position and terms conversation at arm's length than to hold the other one. She was going to have the other one. She got up. Agnes had left tea on the kitchen counter in the kind of permanent, unannounced way that suggested she had been doing this for enough years that she did it automatically. The kitchen was large and old and warm, and the tea was already the right temperature, which meant Agnes had either appeared very quietly sometime in the past 15 minutes or had a very precise understanding of when people in this house woke up. Nadia was fairly certain it was the latter. She took the tea to the window and looked out at the hill, which was now visible in the thin early light, a long slope covered in brown winter grass, a line of dark trees at the top, a sky the color of gray flannel. She heard him before she saw him. Not footsteps, the kitchen was stone-floored and he moved quietly. It was Pip making his specific sound directed at her from somewhere in the doorway. She turned. Ren was in the doorway in plain dark clothes, hair slightly less arranged than it had been at the summit, which meant somewhat more like a person and slightly less like a carefully maintained version of a person. He had tea already. Agnes was thorough. He came in and stood beside the window. They stood looking at the hill together for a moment without speaking. "You are thinking about the offer," he said. "I am thinking about everything," she said. "The offer is part of it." "What is the rest of it?" She looked at him. He was looking at the hill. The other conversation, she said. He was quiet for a moment. The personal one, he said. Yes. I was wondering when we would have it. You could have started it, she said. I was letting you lead, he said. She looked at him. Why? Because you have spent your entire life in rooms where the people around you are concealing things from you, and you have had no choice about that, and you have managed it entirely by yourself, he said. And I am aware that I concealed more things in those 3 days than most people conceal in a year. I wanted you to set the pace. She looked at the hill. He was right, and he knew he was right, and he was offering her the control anyway, and that combination was, she did not have a word for what it was. A thing she had not encountered before. I am not afraid of you, she said. I know. But I am careful, she said, by nature. By necessity, 23 years of careful. I know that too, he said. And what you are asking, either the professional version or the personal version, is the opposite of careful, she said. Attaching myself to the Alpha's court under any credential removes the neutrality that has protected me my entire career. Yes, he said. And the personal version, she stopped. Also removes a neutrality, he said quietly. A different one, she said. Yes. She held the tea in both hands and looked at the grey hill and thought about neutrality. She had been neutral her whole life, not the guild contract kind, deeper than that. The kind that comes from being the only person in every room who knows what the room is actually saying, and choosing repeatedly to translate rather than influence, to render rather than act. She had offered Cora Bell the archive location. She had done that. She had told a man in a garden that he was the only person in 3 days who had not lied to her about anything that mattered. She had done that too. Maybe neutrality was something she had been holding onto past the point where it was serving her. Tell me about the northern fortress, she said. He looked at her. Not the court, she said, not the politics, the place, what it is like to live there. He thought about it. She could see him thinking, deciding how to describe something he had not been asked to describe before. Cold, he said, in the way that northern things are cold, not unpleasant, just definite. The cold has an opinion there. The building is old, very old in the parts that matter. There is a library on the 4th floor that has been collecting for 300 years. What is in it? Everything, he said, which is not accurate but feels accurate. Maps, history, translation archives, ironically. The previous 3 holders of the position apparently had a collector's relationship with language documentation. She felt something shift in her attention. 300 years of translation archives. Yes, he said. At the Alpha Court. Yes. She looked at him. He looked at her. You are not thinking about the personal conversation anymore, he said. I am thinking about both simultaneously, she said. They are not separate. He almost smiled, full enough this time that she saw the whole shape of it, unhurried, without the composed surface holding it back. It changed his face completely. Not dramatically, he did not become a different person. He became more completely the person he already was, the version of him that existed under the version he maintained. She filed that away in the drawer marked, significant. The library is accessible to anyone at the court, he said. That would include a senior translation and liaison specialist. I appreciate the continued pitch, she said. Is it working? I am still here, she said. He drank his tea. Pip appeared from somewhere. She had not heard him enter the kitchen, which suggested either that he was very quiet or that he had been there the entire time in a location she had not checked, and climbed the leg of her chair, an achievement that required considerable effort and no visible embarrassment, and settled on her knee. She looked down at him. He has decided, Ren said. So I see, she said. She put her hand on Pip's back. He curled slightly under the warmth. I have a question, she said, a personal one. Ask, he said. In 7 Summits, she said, you have been in those rooms. You have watched the negotiations and the arguments and the political maneuvering and the moments where people were genuinely trying to get to something right and the moments where they were not. You have done it in disguise, with false names, in an arrangement where nobody in the room knows what they are talking to. She paused. Has anyone before this come close to figuring it out? He was quiet. Clara, he said, 3 summits ago, she looked at me the same way she looked at you. What did she do with it? Nothing, he said. She is from a different era of summit politics. She knows what certain knowledge costs. She chose not to know. Nadia thought about Clara at the dinner table. Whether I know the man, that remains to be seen. And me, she said. You, he said, did not choose not to know. No, she said. Most people, when they sense something they are not supposed to know, step back, he said. They do not want the responsibility. I spent 23 years knowing things I was not supposed to know, she said. I am accustomed to the responsibility. He set his tea down. He looked at her with the full weight of his attention, which she had catalogued over 3 days as the most focused thing she had been subjected to in recent memory, and it had not become less so overnight. The position is genuine, he said. The terms will be fair and formally contracted. Your neutrality within the role will be protected to the extent the position allows. He paused. The personal conversation is separate, as you said, and I understand that you need to set the pace. I am not going to push that. I know, she said. If you were going to push, the copper would tell me. And what does the copper tell you? He said. She thought about it. That you are patient, she said. More patient than you look, and you look considerably patient. That you are cautious about this, she gestured between them, in the way of someone who has been careful for a long time about what they allow to be real. He looked at her. You got all of that from the absence of copper. I got most of it from watching, she said. The copper just confirms. He was quiet for a moment. The fortress, he said, if you took the position. You would live there. In the court residence. Yes, there is a set of rooms on the 2nd floor that have been available since the previous senior specialist retired 3 years ago. He paused. Agnes thinks the morning light in those rooms is very good. She looked at him. He looked back. Agnes has an opinion about the 2nd floor rooms, she said. Agnes has opinions about everything, he said. She usually turns out to be right. She picked up her tea. She looked at the hill. It was fully light now, the gray sky going silver at the edges, the brown grass showing its texture. I need to be back by Monday, she said. I know, he said. And I need to conclude my current guild contracts before any formal arrangement, she said. Of course, he said. That is 2 months minimum, she said. That is acceptable, he said. And I need the formal position documentation before I sign anything. It will be ready when you return to the city, he said. She looked at him. How? Because I will have it prepared tonight, he said, and delivered by courier tomorrow morning. She thought about the efficiency of a man who had maintained 7 false summit identities while running the affairs of an entire court. You are very organized, she said. I have to be, he said. How many people at the court know about the summits, she asked, the disguises, the actual attendance? 4, he said, Lawrence, Agnes, my personal secretary who handles the credential construction, and now you. 5, she said. 5, he agreed. She looked at Pip on her knee. And Pip, she said. Pip has always known, he said. He does not count because he was not told. She thought about that, about an animal that had been a part of this secret for whatever the length of a ferret's relevant memory was, and had looked at her in a ballroom full of 114 people, and decided she was worth bringing a pen to. Why me, she asked, not about the position, about the original question, the one from the garden. Why tell me specifically in that garden? You could have said goodbye at the entrance hall. You had managed not telling me for 3 days. You could have continued. He looked at the hill. You asked who I was, he said. And you asked it the way someone asks who a person is, not what they are or what they have. You asked who. He paused. No one asks me that. She sat with that for a very long time. The kitchen was warm. Pip was warm on her knee. Outside, the hill was going from silver to gold at the very top, where the light was catching the grass, and below it the rest of the slope was still in the cool shadow of morning. 2 days, she said. 2 days, he agreed. She looked at the gold at the top of the hill. Then I would like to see the library, she said. He looked at her. Today, she said, if it is accessible, I would like to see 300 years of translation archives. The full smile appeared again. No armor, no maintenance. After breakfast, he said. Agnes makes breakfast. Agnes makes everything, he said. She started when she heard the car. Nadia looked toward the kitchen door, through which the smell of something very good was beginning to drift. She thought about 2 months, about guild contracts and formal documentation and a Monday appointment and a city apartment and 14 summits worth of professional history. She thought about a library on the 4th floor. She thought about 5 people and a ferret who knew where the Alpha King actually spent his summits and what it meant to be in that number. She looked at Pip. Pip looked at her. All right, she said. Not to Pip, not to Wren, not to the hill. Just to the morning, which was golden at the edges and getting lighter, and to the particular feeling of standing at the beginning of something that was no longer without a name. She could feel it, steady as copper and twice as real. It was called forward. She was going forward. The library was on the 4th floor, and it was exactly as he had described and nothing like she had imagined. She had imagined something grand, carved shelves, high windows, the deliberate weight of a room that knew its own importance. What she found was different, a large, irregular space that had clearly grown over 3 centuries by absorbing the rooms beside it and beside those, the result being a library that had no single architectural intention, but instead the accumulated logic of a place that had been used, genuinely and repeatedly, by people who needed what was in it. The shelves were not all the same height. The floor had 3 different levels connected by 2 small steps. There were reading tables of different ages pushed into different corners based on where the light fell, and the light was considerable. 6 windows on the east wall and 3 on the west, which should not have worked but did, the angles producing a crosshatch of morning illumination that touched everything without flattening it. She stood in the doorway and did not move for approximately 1 minute. Wren stood slightly behind her, and she was aware that he was watching her process it rather than prompting her to enter, and that was the correct thing to do, and she appreciated it very much. Pip had preceded them both by approximately 30 seconds, and was now on a reading table near the east windows, sitting upright and looking at her with the expression of an animal who has lived in this room and knows its value, and is waiting to see whether she does too. She entered. She went directly to the far wall where the older shelves were, she could tell by the wear on the edges and the different patination of the wood. She looked at the labels, not alphabetical, organizational. By period, then by region, then by, she moved along the shelf, reading by document type. The previous holders organized this, she said. The third one began the organization, Wren said. He was standing a few feet away, giving her room. The 4th and 5th extended it. The 6th reorganized the whole east wall when he realized the period system was inconsistent. There are still arguments in the margin notes about the correct approach. She pulled a volume from the shelf. Old, not fragile, well-preserved, the way things are when people have actually been using them rather than storing them. Inside the front cover in faded ink, a dated annotation in a hand she did not recognize, referring to a source she did. This references the 1844 Coastal Agreement, she said. The translation dispute, he said. 3 different packs claimed the official version had been rendered incorrectly. The argument went on for 11 years before someone sat down with all 3 texts and compared them. She looked at the margin note. The previous holder had written, the original translator was right. Everyone else was managing their preferred interpretation. She put the book back, moved to the next shelf, and the one after that. 20 minutes later she was sitting on the floor, because the nearest chair was too far away, and she had not wanted to lose the thread, with 4 volumes open around her, following a translation chain from a trade agreement in 1902 through 3 successive interpretations, each one slightly more politically adjusted than the last. The 3rd interpretation, she said without looking up, added a phrase that is not in the original text. I know, he said. She looked up. He was sitting in a chair at a nearby table, which he had pulled to a position that did not crowd her but was close enough to be in the conversation, and he had his own folder, different from the summit one, a permanent-looking document folder that belonged to this room, and he appeared to have been working in it while she explored. You have read all of this, she said. Not all of it, he said, most of the relevant sections. The 1902 interpretation is used as the source for the current Northern Corridor border claim, she said. Yes, he said, but it has a fabricated phrase. Yes, he said. Gerald Frost's entire position rests on a 1902 interpretation that added language that was not in the original 1897 text, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at him. You came to the summit knowing this, she said. I came knowing that the Northern Corridor's claim was historically unsound, he said. The specific fabrication, I had the analysis. I needed the current summit record to show the claim being made in real time, under formal witness, so that the challenge to it carries the weight of the proper process rather than a court assertion. She thought about that. You were building the formal record, she said. Cora Bell will file a formal challenge now, he said, based on the session record, her archive access, and the secondary appendix. The challenge will go through the established process. In 12 to 18 months, the Northern Corridor's claim collapses legally. Without your name anywhere on the challenge, she said. Without my name anywhere, he said. She sat on the floor with 4 open books around her and thought about 7 summits and what they had been building toward, and the patience that required, and the extraordinary discipline of a man who could see the full shape of something and stay out of the foreground while it assembled itself. Why does it need to be without your name? She asked. He set his folder down. The Alpha Court asserting a position on a territorial dispute between 2 packs is not a neutral action, he said, even if the position is legally correct, even if the historical evidence is overwhelming. The assertion carries the weight of the court, which means the losing party's grievance becomes a grievance against the court, not a loss on the merits. But if a pack delegate makes the challenge, she said, on the record through the process, then it is the process working, he said. The losing party has lost to the process, not to me. She looked at him for a long time. You have been arranging for the process to work correctly, she said, for 7 summits, not for any specific outcome, for the process itself. Yes, he said. That is, she stopped. Say it, he said. That is extraordinary, she said, and also very lonely. He held her gaze. I told you it was lonely, he said. You told me, she said. I am telling you that I now understand the specific quality of the loneliness, which is different from understanding the word. He was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said, it is. She closed the 4 open books carefully and put them back in their places. She got up off the floor, brushing the dust from her clothes, and walked to the window that looked east. The day had fully arrived. The hill outside was gold and brown and still, and beyond it other hills, and beyond those the dark line of the mountains that kept the north in the north. I am going to take the position, she said. She heard him shift in his chair. I have not made the official offer yet, he said. You have made it 5 times in different wordings, she said, and I am going to accept it. I need to conclude the guild contracts and handle the formal documentation, and there are several people I need to talk to, but the answer is yes. She paused. Because the work is significant and I am genuinely qualified for it, and I want to be in a room with 300 years of translation archives. And the personal version, he said. She turned from the window. He was looking at her with the full attention, the no-armor version, the expression that had been developing over 3 days of hotel breakfasts and restricted sessions, and a car going north. The personal version, she said, is that I have spent 23 years in rooms where everything was copper. And you are one of very few things in my life that is not, and I am not going to walk away from that because the context is complicated. He held her gaze. The context is complicated, he said. I am aware, she said. I am the one who catalogued it. There will be people who object, he said. A personal relationship between a court specialist and the Alpha. I know, she said. It will require management, he said. I know that too, she said. I have been managing complicated things my entire life. I am very good at it. He almost said something. She saw him start it and redirect. What were you going to say? She asked. He looked at her. I was going to say that I would prefer you not have to manage it alone. No copper, every word. She walked back from the window. She sat down in the chair across from his. She put her elbows on the table and looked at him directly, which was a thing she had been doing for 3 days but which felt different now, in the library, with the context fully visible and the formal distance of the summit gone. Tell me something true, she said. He looked at her. Something you have not said to anyone, she said. Not a secret in the sense of information, something personal, something true about you. He thought about it. She watched him think about it, the specific work of finding a thing he had not said aloud before and trusting someone else with it. I come to the summits in disguise, he said. That is known. The reason I gave was strategic, building the record, ensuring the process. He paused. The reason is also that when I am there as someone else, the work is mine, not the court's, not the positions, mine. I did it, I thought of it, I arranged it, not the Alpha King. He stopped. And for 3 days every 4 years, that is enough. She sat with that for a very long time. A man who had taken on the most significant role in the Northern Territories and had found a way inside that role to carve out 3 days in which the work belonged to him personally. Not to the crown, not to history, to him. She thought about her 14 summits, about being the translator, the invisible professional presence, doing the real work in the margins where no one could see it. I understand that, she said. I thought you might, he said. Pip walked from the reading table to her table and sat down at the edge, between the two of them, looking back and forth with the attentive patience of an animal who had been waiting for this conversation to arrive at its actual topic. The formal offer will come tomorrow, Wren said. By courier, as I said, you can take as much time as you need to review it. I will take a reasonable amount of time, she said, not more. That sounds like you, he said. You have known me for 3 days, she said. I know, he said, it still sounds like you. She looked at the library around them. The shelves and the different height books and the margin notes and the east windows and the accumulated work of previous specialists who had lived here and organized things by period and argued in the margins about the correct approach. She felt the particular quality of a place that had been used and was ready to be used again. I have a question about the margin note in the 1844 volume, she said. He blinked now. The previous holder wrote that the original translator was right, she said. Do you know which translator? Because there are 3 names associated with that dispute, and I want to know which one he was referring to. He looked at her for a moment with an expression that was, she did not have a name for it yet, but it was in the same family as the almost smile and the full smile, and considerably warmer than either. Second shelf from the right, he said. There is a red volume faded to orange at the spine. The name is in the first annotation. She got up. She found the red faded to orange volume. She opened it. She read the first annotation. She stood at the shelf and smiled to herself, very slightly, in the way of someone who has been looking for a piece of information for a long time, and has found it in exactly the right place. Eleanor Marsh, she said. Eleanor Marsh, he confirmed. She was right, Nadia said, about all 3 texts. I read her original analysis 5 years ago, and I have been waiting to find out whether anyone else came to the same conclusion. In 1847, apparently, he said. She put the book back, she returned to the chair. 300 years of this, she said. At least, he said. I am going to need more than 2 days, she said. You can come back, he said. After the contracts, after Monday, the library does not go anywhere. She looked at the east windows, at the hill in the gold morning light. She thought about Eleanor Marsh, who was right about all 3 texts in 1847, and about a margin note that said so in 1902, and about a room on the 4th floor that had been collecting things for 3 centuries and still had room for more. I know, she said. She meant the library. She also meant everything else. The copper was still absent. It had been absent since the garden. She was beginning to understand that might be the most significant fact of her life so far. She went back to the city on Sunday. Lawrence drove her, the same quiet journey in reverse, the hills unfolding in the opposite direction, the gold of the previous morning replaced by a low gray sky that was heavy but not threatening, the kind of weather the North did as a default mode. She had spent 2 days in the lower residence, which was more than she had expected and less than she would have preferred, a sentence she recognized as significant and filed without acting on it yet. She had spent most of Saturday in the library. Wren had been in and out. He had a working schedule that appeared to follow a logic she was not yet familiar with. the administrative life of the Alpha Court carrying on even in the lower residence through a combination of dispatch documents, signal correspondence, and a secretary named Owen who appeared briefly on Saturday morning via an audio connection, and conducted a brisk 20-minute session of court business without once acknowledging that he was aware his employer had a guest, which he respected as exceptional professional discretion. Between the library and the meals Agnes produced with the quiet authority of someone for whom feeding people was a form of statement, and 2 more conversations with Wren that had moved from careful to considerably less careful by the second evening, she had found her footing. Not romantic footing, she was not in a hurry, that was not the footing she meant. The footing she meant was simpler, she knew where she was, she knew what she was walking toward. She had the particular internal stability of someone who has been uncertain about a significant thing for several days and has now resolved the uncertainty, even if the thing itself is still ahead of her and will require considerable work. She was going to take the position, she was going to conclude her guild contracts. She was going to come back to the northern estate in a formal capacity, and she was going to work in that library, and she was going to have the personal conversation in the pace she had been granted, and that she would use correctly. She was going north. Lawrence drove her through the northern hills, and then the central lowlands, and then the city outskirts, and at her building he stopped and got her bag from the boot without being asked, and said, "Have a good evening, Miss Vance," with the tone of someone who has driven people on complicated weekends for a long time and knows how to send them home properly. She went upstairs. Her apartment was exactly as she had left it, the translation books on the shelves in their system, the small green notebook on the desk that she had not brought to the summit because it was the original and she used copies on assignment, the particular quiet of a space that is inhabited by one person with specific and consistent habits. She sat down at the desk. She picked up the green notebook. She opened it to a new page and wrote the date and 2 words, "Going north." Then she put it down and picked up her phone and called the guild coordinator, because Monday's appointment was now a formality, and she was not the kind of person who let formalities become surprises. The formal position documentation arrived Monday morning by courier. She opened it at the kitchen table with coffee that was considerably better than the estate version, which was saying something, and read it the way she read everything, carefully, completely, without skipping the parts that were tedious, because the tedious parts were frequently where the important things were hidden. It was thorough. The terms were fair. More than fair, actually. She was not naive about her market value, and the offered compensation reflected a genuine understanding of what the role required. The scope of responsibility was clearly defined: senior translation and liaison for the Alpha's court, with a specific provision for involvement in summit and territorial negotiation support. There was a confidentiality structure that was more sophisticated than anything she had seen in guild contracts, which made sense given what the role would expose her to. And there was, she turned to the 4th page, a specific provision she had not expected. The provision stated that the specialist retained the right to decline any assignment that conflicted with their professional judgment, with a formal review process rather than a direct mandate. It had a note in the margin handwritten, "This clause is non-negotiable." She read the handwritten note twice. She thought about a man who had told her in a garden that authority that does not look at its own consequences stops being authority. He had written a non-negotiable clause that protected her professional autonomy directly into the formal offer. She sat with her coffee for a long time. Then she picked up her pen and initialed the document. The guild contracts took 6 weeks, not 2 months. She had underestimated how ready she was to conclude them, or how ready the guild was. Her coordinator, a practical woman named Helen who had been placing translators for 20 years, and had developed a good sense of when someone was at a natural transition point, had listened to Nadia's explanation of the opportunity and said without particular emotion that she had been wondering when something like this would happen, and had begun processing the paperwork the same afternoon. 6 weeks of concluded assignments, final documentation, and the particular process of winding down a professional identity she had held for 3 years. Not the ability, that was not something that wound down, but the framework she had built around it, the guild affiliation, the summit rotation, the specific version of herself that showed up to Interpack events with a translation headset and a professional smile and 2 notebooks. She gave herself 1 evening to sit with the end of it. It had been good work, she had done it well. The green notebook had a full shelf of predecessors, copies filled with private observations that had never made it into any official record, and she was not going to pretend that was not a loss. All those summits, all those rooms, all that copper, and the only person who had ever known about any of it was her. But that was also the thing that was changing. She packed 3 boxes from the apartment, arranged for the rest to go into storage, and on a Wednesday morning in early spring, Lawrence was at the curb. The northern fortress was not what she had expected. She had been to the lower residence, and she had reset her expectations accordingly, less imposing, more lived in. But the fortress itself was something she had not recalibrated for, and it arrived as she came over the last hill and the road turned, and suddenly there it was. Not dramatic, not the forbidding structure she had imagined. Large, yes. Old, absolutely. But settled into its landscape in the way of something that has been in the same place long enough that the landscape has organized itself around the building rather than the other way around. The mountains were directly behind it. The valley below it was green with the particular green of a northern spring, very bright and very specific, the green that only exists for about 3 weeks before it settles into the deeper summer color. Lawrence drove through the main gates. Staff were present, but not ceremonially so. This was not an official arrival, which had been specified in the communication she had received from Owen 2 weeks previously. She arrived as staff, which was what she was. She was met at the side entrance by Owen, who was younger than his voice suggested, and had the organized, precise manner of someone who had been keeping the Alpha Court's administration running and took that responsibility seriously. He showed her to the second-floor rooms that Agnes had recommended, told her the practical information about the residence, handed her a pass that gave her access to the relevant areas, and said her formal start date was listed as Monday, but he would be available if she needed orientation materials before that. He left. She stood in the second-floor rooms, which were 3 connected spaces, a bedroom, a sitting room, a working room with a desk and bookshelves and a window that looked out over the valley, and Agnes had been entirely right about the morning light. She put her 3 boxes down. She looked at the window. She looked at the valley going green in the spring below her. She heard a sound from the corridor. The specific sound. She turned. Pip was in the doorway. He looked at her with his bright, patient eyes. Then he walked directly to the nearest box, sat on top of it, and looked at the room around him with the satisfied expression of an animal who has been waiting for a situation to resolve correctly and is pleased that it has. She looked at Pip. Pip looked at her. "All right," she said, again not quite to him and not quite to the room, just to the morning. "Agnes said you arrived." She turned. Wren was in the doorway that Pip had vacated, not in summit clothes or travel clothes, in the clothes of someone in their own home, plain, simple, completely unmanaged, the version of himself that existed when he was not being the Alpha King in any legible sense. He looked like a person, specifically like the person she had watched becoming visible over 3 days in a northern estate, the one behind the credentials. "I arrived," she said. He looked at the room, at the boxes, at Pip, who had not moved from his box. "Owen will have sent you the orientation materials," he said. "He has," she said. "The library access was included in your credentials." "I saw," she said. A pause, the kind that was not awkward, just the specific quiet of 2 people who have been in correspondence for 6 weeks, and are now occupying the same physical space again, and are recalibrating for that. "There is a briefing this afternoon," he said. "Owen has the file. It is the first assignment, a territorial correspondence review that has been waiting for a senior specialist." He paused. "It is not urgent if you need time to settle." "I do not need time to settle," she said. He looked at her. "I will read the file before lunch," she said. Something moved in his expression. The quiet thing, the one she did not have a name for, that was considerably warmer than the almost smile. "Then I will see you at the briefing," he said. He started to turn. "Wren," she said. He stopped. She looked at the valley through the window. "Thank you," she said, "for the non-negotiable clause." A pause. "You were not supposed to identify that as non-standard," he said. "I told you," she said. "I read everything." He did not respond, but when she looked back at the door, the expression had resolved fully, the way she had seen it resolve once before in a library, unhurried and complete. Then he was gone. She turned back to her room. Pip relocated from the box to the windowsill, where he arranged himself with total confidence and looked out at the valley. She opened the first box. The first thing in it was the small green notebook. She put it on the desk in the working room, beside the new notebooks she had bought for this position, and she opened it to the last entry. Going north, it said. She had written that 6 weeks ago. She wrote beneath it, arrived. Then she picked up the orientation file Owen had sent, poured the coffee that had appeared on the desk. Agnes, she thought, must move in ways that defied normal observation, and sat down at the desk in the morning light. The valley was green and very still below her. The copper was absent. She read the file. She was here. She was working. For the first time in 23 years, she was working in a room where she did not need to keep the most significant thing about herself in a closed drawer. That felt not dramatic. Not the relief she might have predicted. Just correct. The way things feel when they have arrived at the place they were always going. The first 3 months were the hardest. Not because the work was difficult. The work was the most genuinely engaging work she had done, the kind that used all of it, the languages and the observation and the ability, without requiring her to hide any layer from any other layer. Owen was an excellent administrator and understood immediately what she needed and how she organized her process. The library was everything she had known it would be. The briefings were substantive, and the correspondence review was meaningful, and she was good at it in a way that the people around her could see, which was new. The hard part was proximity. Not personal proximity in the way she had anticipated. She had thought the complicated thing would be navigating the personal alongside the professional, the balance of two things that occupied different registers running simultaneously. That was not where the difficulty lived. The difficulty was that she was very good at her job and Ren was very good at his, and the two jobs overlapped in a way that meant they were in the same rooms, the same briefings, the same complex and high-stakes conversations, regularly and by design. And the working relationship was so clean, so functional, so exactly right that the line between working and the other thing was entirely invisible. Which made the other thing very present. Which she had not accounted for. She sat in the 4th month in the library on a Tuesday afternoon with a translation dispute from 1923 open in front of her that she was not reading, and she acknowledged to herself, with the honesty she had committed to cultivating, that the personal conversation she had said she would set the pace on had been set to a pace of entirely stationary for 4 months. Not because she was afraid, she had examined that question carefully. Because she did not know, in this specific and unprecedented situation, what a first step looked like. She had never been in this territory before. She had been in the territory of interesting people, of people who were intelligent and warm and good at what they did. She had not been in the territory of someone who had reorganized her understanding of what it felt like to be in a room with another person. She put her hands flat on the open book. She thought about the non-negotiable clause. She thought about the car going north and the hill in the morning light, and the library and the valley going green and arrived, written in her own handwriting under going north. She thought about what she was afraid of, which was not the thing she had told herself she was afraid of. She was not afraid of complicated. She was not afraid of significant. She had been managing complicated and significant her entire professional life. She was afraid of the copper. Specifically, she was afraid of the day the copper came back. She had spent 4 months in close, consistent contact with someone she had met in a wreckage of 9 wine glasses, and in 4 months the copper had never come. Not once, not a trace. Every statement, every professional exchange, every moment where he was the alpha king and she was the court specialist, and they were managing something collectively and carefully, all of it clean. And the fear was not that he would lie to her, the fear was the opposite. The fear was, what if he never does? What if this is the one person in her life who simply does not? What if she had spent 23 years cataloging lies from every direction, and the consequence of that was that she did not know what to do with the absence of them? What if the ability, which had protected her entirely by telling her what was wrong, had left her with no mechanism for recognizing what was right? She sat with that for a long time. Then she closed the 1923 dispute and put it back on the shelf and went to find Ren. He was in the fourth-floor study, which was adjacent to the library and which he used for the work that required sustained attention, policy review, long-form correspondence, the kind of decision that needed several hours and a window with a view. Owen had told her early on that when Ren was in the fourth-floor study, the standard instruction was not to interrupt without cause. She knocked. A pause. "Come in," he said. She came in. He was at the desk with 3 documents open and a pen that he set down when he saw her. He did not look irritated at the interruption. He looked attentive. He always looked attentive. "Is it the Harwick correspondence?" he said. Owen thought it might need a second review. "It is not the Harwick correspondence," she said. She sat down in the chair across from his desk. Not a visitor's chair, it was a reading chair that had been pulled from the corner at some point and had simply stayed. She had sat in it before during working sessions. It felt familiar. He looked at her. "I have been setting the pace," she said. He was quiet. "You gave me that," she said. "You said you would not push. You have not pushed for months." "No," he said. "I have been thinking about why," she said. "Why I set the pace to not moving." He waited. He was very good at waiting. "I am afraid of the copper coming back," she said. He looked at her. Something shifted in his face, not surprise exactly. More like the specific attention of someone who has been waiting for a thing to arrive and is now present for its arrival. "Explain," he said. "My entire ability is a detection system," she said. "It tells me when something is wrong. It has been telling me when things are wrong since I was 7 years old. And it has never," she paused, "in 4 months, not once, there has been no copper from you." "I know," he said. "And the thing I am afraid of is that I do not know how to use the absence," she said. "I am very good at knowing when something is wrong. I do not have the same competence for knowing when something is." She stopped. He looked at her steadily. "Right," she said. He held her gaze for a long moment. "Nadia," he said, very quietly. "Yes," she said. "Has it occurred to you," he said, "that the absence of copper is the detection system working correctly? That it is telling you something is right in exactly the same way it has always told you something is wrong?" She sat with that. "The system has 2 states," he said. "Present, absent. You have spent 23 years learning to read the present state. The absent state is the same system giving you the same quality of information." She looked at the window, at the mountains behind the fortress, which were going from white to the last of the winter gray as the season completed its turn. "That is a very logical framing," she said. "I am a logical person," he said. "You are also," she said, "the subject of what the system is reading. You might not be the most reliable voice on this particular question." He almost smiled. "That is fair," he said. She looked back at him. "Tell me what you know," she said. "About this, about us, what you know specifically." He looked at her. He set his pen down. He put both hands flat on the desk in a gesture that she recognized as the body's version of "I am being careful and deliberate, and I want you to know it." "I know," he said, "that I had a different life before a woman walked into a tray of 9 wine glasses and then looked at me with absolutely no fear and started telling me about the cleaning potential of the 3rd-floor staff room." He paused. "And that what was different about my life before that moment was that it was considerably quieter in a way that I had decided to call acceptable. No copper, not a trace." "I know," he said, "that I spent 3 days at a summit I have attended 7 times, and for the first time found that the thing I was most aware of in every room was not the negotiation. No copper. And I know," he said, "that I wrote a non-negotiable clause into a contract because I wanted you in this building, and I did not want the structure of the building to be the thing that made you agree. I wanted you to agree because you wanted to be here." She looked at him. "And do you know whether I do," she said, "want to be here?" He looked at her for a long time. "The copper is absent," he said. She absorbed that. He had just used her own ability to answer her own question. She looked at him. He looked back. The mountains were behind him in the window, and the spring light was coming in from the side, and the 4th-floor study was very quiet. "I want to be here," she said, not to the window, to him. "No copper necessary." He stood up. She stood up. They were separated by the width of a desk, which was not a large desk, and she thought, this is the pace. This is what the pace has been building toward. Not a dramatic moment, not an arrival she could have described from a distance. Just two people standing in a room where everything has been true. I am going to do something, he said. I know, she said. He moved around the desk. She did not move away. He stopped close enough that she had to look up slightly, which she noted for no practical reason other than that her mind had a habit of noting things. He put his hand against the side of her face, very carefully, the gesture of someone who has thought about this moment with some consideration and is now in it and is being specific. She felt nothing copper-colored. She felt something else entirely, warm and clear and entirely specifically true. Nadia, he said. Yes, she said. He lowered his head. She met him halfway, because she was not the kind of person who waited at the destination while someone else did all the walking. The fourth-floor study was quiet around them, and the mountains were still in the window, and somewhere in the library next door Pip would be on some reading table doing his focused and patient observation of whatever he had decided was interesting today. When they separated, it was by a small distance, and the study was still quiet, and she looked at him, and he looked at her, and both of them had the particular expression of people who have arrived somewhere after some significant time in transit. The work, she said. Still exists, he said. I should finish the review, she said. You should, he said. Neither of them moved immediately. The Harwick correspondence does not actually need a second review, she said. That was Owen being thorough. Owen is always thorough, he said. I will finish the 1923 dispute, she said. Good, he said. She stepped back, she straightened her jacket, which did not need straightening. He returned to the desk, which did not require immediate return. At the door she stopped. Wren, she said. He looked at her. The answer to the question in the garden, she said, the one the coordinator interrupted. He looked at her very steadily. I know what the answer would have been, she said. I have known since the library that first morning. I did not say it then because I needed the time. And now, he said. She looked at him, he looked back. The mountains were enormous and still in the window. Now I have had the time, she said. She left. She went back to the library. She sat down at the reading table. She opened the 1923 dispute. She read it with complete, clear, total attention, and the copper was absent, and the mountains were visible through the library's eastern windows, and Pip came from wherever he had been and sat on the corner of the table the way he had sat on the corner of the breakfast table at the lower residence, and she did not look up or acknowledge him, but she felt the small warm presence of him there. She worked. The afternoon was very good. The Northern Corridor challenge came through in the 11th month. Not the legal resolution, that would take longer, the formal process moving at the pace formal processes maintained by design. But the official filing, Cora Bell's formal challenge on the historical documentation, entered the territorial record in the middle of a Tuesday while Nadia was in a translation session for a different dispute entirely, and she learned about it when Owen sent a brief note to her working room that said, Harwick territorial filing confirmed. Thought you would want to know. She sat with that for a moment. She thought about a basement archive in an old estate, and a red folder going slightly orange at the spine, and Eleanor Marsh being right about all three texts in 1847. She thought about a man who had spent 7 summits building toward this, and had told nobody, and had sat in disguise in observer galleries watching rooms full of people work toward a conclusion he had prepared the ground for. She wrote in the green notebook, Harwick filing confirmed, process working correctly. She went back to the translation session. The summit announcement came 4 weeks later. The next Interpack summit was scheduled for 18 months out. Standard format, the Whitmore estate, the usual rotation of packs and independent observers and neutral translators. Nadia read the announcement on a Thursday morning over Agnes's coffee, which she had developed a very strong opinion about, and sat thinking about it for approximately 10 minutes before she went to find Wren. He was in the first-floor meeting room with Owen and 2 members of the external correspondence team, in the middle of something that appeared to be going fine. She stood in the doorway and made brief eye contact with him, which was something they had developed a very precise system for over the past months, a shorthand for "I have something when you have a moment," that he read without missing a beat in the conversation, and he wrapped up the relevant section and said to Owen that they would continue after lunch. They went to the East Corridor, which had windows over the valley and was reliably quiet at this hour. "The summit announcement," she said. "I saw it," he said. "You will attend," she said, "not a question." "Of course," he said. "8 this time," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked out at the valley. It was fully into summer now, the deep settled green that came after the bright spring, the mountains behind them going blue in the haze. "The credentials," she said. "Already in preparation," he said. "Owen handles that." "Owen handles the construction," he said. "I handle the research, the documentation that needs to be in position before the summit, the archive access, the preliminary analysis." "I can help with that," she said. He looked at her. "The research," she said. "The documentation preparation. You have done it alone for 7 summits. You do not need to do it alone." He was quiet for a moment. "You understand what that means," he said. "The preparation is significant," she said. "Yes, I understand the full scope." She paused. "I am the senior translation and liaison specialist for the Alpha's court. The scope of this role includes the summit preparation. That is what the contract says." He looked at her with an expression that she had spent 11 months cataloging and had still not fully named, but which was in the same family as the full smile and the Northcar look and the 4th floor study look, and which she had recently decided did not need a name because she would know it when she saw it. "You are going to be extraordinarily good at this," he said. "No copper." "I know," she said. He almost laughed. She heard the edge of it, a sound she had been learning to recognize, the thing that lived just past the managed expression, the one that emerged when he was not thinking about whether to let it out. "The preliminary archive research," he said. "There are 3 disputed documents that will likely be referenced in the upcoming sessions." "Send them to me," she said. "Today." "After lunch," she said. "I have a session this morning." He nodded. She started to walk back toward the main corridor. "Nadia," he said. She stopped. "The summit," he said. "I have a different credential arrangement this time. The previous ones were observer level. For this summit, I intend to attend as a senior territorial consultant." She turned. He was looking at her with the specific expression of someone who has made a decision that required some consideration and has arrived at it with full intention. "That is a more visible role than observer," she said. "Yes," he said. "People will be able to place the credential," she said. "Some of them," he said. "And if someone connects it too. Then the summit has a consultant whose qualifications are legitimate," he said, "and the Alpha King is still officially in residence at the Northern Fortress. The 2 things are compatible." She looked at him. "You are expanding the disguise," she said, "not ending it but giving yourself more room inside it." "Yes," he said. "Why now?" He looked at her with the directness he had been developing, or perhaps that she had been learning to see, the version of him that was not managed. "Because 7 summits of working alone is enough," he said, "and because I have someone to work with now, and because the scope of the preparation is going to be larger this time, and I do not want to manage it as a solo project. No copper, not a molecule." She thought about the reading table in the library, which had recently begun to hold 2 sets of notes at the end of a working day instead of 1, about the briefings that had started as formal and had become something more like collaborative, about the specific rhythm of working alongside someone who worked in a way that was not identical to hers but compatible with it, in a way she had not anticipated. "Send me the 3 documents this afternoon," she said. "After your session," he said. "I will have preliminary analysis by Friday," she said. "You will have it by Thursday," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "You do not know my working speed." "I have 11 months of evidence," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Thursday," she allowed. She went to her morning session. The archive research took 2 weeks, not because it was slow, she was fast, and Ren knew the relevant territory, and together they covered ground that would have taken either of them a month working separately. It was the depth she went to, not the speed. The 3 disputed documents turned out to be 6, once she had followed the chain of references. She pulled every secondary source. She built a cross-reference table that she shared with Ren on the second Thursday, which he looked at for a long time and then said was the most useful single document he had encountered in 8 years of summit preparation. She had not told him that she spent 3 evenings doing it. She had also not told him that the second evening she had started at 10 and looked up, and it was 2 in the morning, and she had not noticed the passing of time, which had not happened to her since she was a student, and that she had felt, in that moment, the particular kind of alive that comes from doing work that uses all of you at once. She told him on the third Thursday, when he found her in the library at 7 in the morning and asked how long she had been there. "Since 5, she said. He looked at her. "Nadia. I found the secondary source for the 1931 water access claim," she said. "It was in the East Shelf, third section, in a volume that was misfiled under the wrong decade. It changes the entire legal context of the current challenge." He came to the table she showed him. He read it. The library was very quiet. "This changes the summit preparation significantly," he said. "I know," she said. "That is why I stayed." He looked at her. "You have been here since 5 in the morning," he said. "I started at 2, she said. He was quiet. "Agnes will not be pleased," he said. "Agnes will be pleased about the misfiled volume," she said. "She likes it when things are found." He sat down in the chair across from her. He looked at the cross-reference table. He looked at the misfiled volume. He looked at her with the expression that was not yet asleep and therefore had even less management on it than usual. "I want to tell you something," he said. "Tell me," she said. He looked at the east windows, where the early light was doing what the early light in this library did, arriving at an angle that touched everything without flattening it. "7 summits," he said. "I came home from each one and the work was done and the outcome was correct, and I sat in this building, and the preparation for the next one started almost immediately, because there was nothing to come home to that was more present than the work." She held his gaze. "There is something more present now," he said. "No copper, the most complete truth." She looked at him, he looked at her. The library held the morning around them, all the centuries of it, all the margin notes and the misfiled volumes and the previous specialists who had argued about the right approach and been right about all 3 texts and built something that was still being used. "I am going to sleep for 4 hours, she said. "Yes," he said. "And then I am going to finish the cross-reference," she said. "I know," he said. "And then we are going to have dinner," she said. "Not a working dinner, a dinner." He looked at her. She had been setting the pace for 11 months. "Yes," he said very quietly. She closed the open books. She put the cross-reference table in the folder she had labeled for it. She stood up. 4 hours, she said. She walked out of the library. In the corridor she stopped and leaned her back against the wall for a moment, because the morning was very early and she had been awake for a long time, and the particular fullness of the past few minutes was sitting in her chest in a way that needed a moment of still before she carried it anywhere. 23 years of copper. 7 summits of working alone. A ferret who brought her a pen. She pushed off the wall. She walked down the corridor past the windows that looked over the valley, going from dark to the first gray of morning, the mountains behind the fortress enormous and silent and still. She walked to room 2 on the second floor, not room 3, the one Agnes had originally assigned her, but the one next to it that she had, somewhere around month 3, quietly and without announcement begun to occupy because the bookshelves were better. She did not examine the significance of which room was adjacent to which. She was tired and she had 4 hours. She slept. She woke at 10 with the clean certainty of someone who has had exactly the right amount of sleep, which she recognized as rare and worth noting. She finished the cross-reference by 2 in the afternoon. It was Thursday. She sent it to Ren with a message that said, "Thursday as you predicted, and try not to look smug about it." His response came in 4 minutes. "I make no such commitment. This is extraordinary work. No copper possible through text." She did not need it, she knew. She opened the green notebook. She turned to the page that said going north and arrived and Harwick filing confirmed, process working correctly. She wrote one more line. She looked at what she had written. Then she closed the notebook and went to get ready for dinner. They had dinner in the small dining room on the ground floor, which was the room the residents used when the dinner was not official, smaller, warmer, a round table that eliminated the head-of-table question, a fire that Agnes lit at 4 and did not ask any questions about. Agnes brought the food. Agnes did not linger. They ate and they talked, the way they had been eating and talking for 11 months, except without the professional layer, which removed a frequency she had not realized she had been maintaining until it was quiet. She told him about the first summit she had attended, 22 years old, completely overwhelmed, too young to be trusted with the role and too capable not to be given it. She had translated for 6 hours without a break and then sat in a corridor and counted to 10 in all 4 of her languages because it was the only calming technique she had at the time. He told her about the first summit he had attended as himself. Not in disguise, the one before the disguises, when he was new to the position and attended formally and spent 3 days watching things go wrong in ways he could see, but could not address because the wrong things were happening through legitimate process, and the only way to change them was to change the process. That was when you decided to come differently, she said. That was when I realized, he said, that the process and the outcome were not the same problem. I had been treating them as one. And the disguise separated them, she said. The disguise let me address the process without the outcome being attributed to the position, he said. The work is the same, the accountability is just distributed correctly, she said. He looked at her. Yes. They finished eating. Agnes removed the plates with the quiet efficiency of someone who had cleared these plates for several decades and found it completely unremarkable. The fire was doing what fires do in old northern rooms, making everything specific, the light and the warmth and the particular quality of attention that comes when the world outside is dark and the world inside is lit from below. In the garden, he said. She looked at him. At the estate, he said. The question you asked, who are you, I was going to answer. You answered later, she said. Ren Aldrich Voss, Alpha King. That is what I am, he said, not who. She held his gaze. Who, she said. He looked at the fire for a moment, then at her. Someone who spent 7 summits building something alone that is considerably better built with someone else, he said. Someone who makes correct decisions at scale and has not for most of his life had a single person nearby who told him the truth without managing the telling. He paused. Someone whose ferret has better instincts than most of the court. She almost laughed. She let it out this time. Small, warm, real. He looked at her when she laughed, with an expression she was going to let remain nameless because some things were better held than labeled. And you, he said, who are you? She thought about it, the real answer. Someone who has been the most informed person in every room for 23 years and has never been able to use any of it, she said. Someone who is learning what it feels like when the ability is not a management problem. Is it better, he said. She looked at him. Ask me in another 11 months, she said. He was quiet. No copper, she said, on anything I have said to you tonight. I know, he said, I believe you. You do not need to believe me, she said. I would tell you if there were. I know that too, he said. She looked at the fire for a moment. Tomorrow, she said, the summit preparation continues. Yes, he said. And we need to discuss the credential arrangement for the consultant cover, she said. Owen's construction will need to be stronger than the previous identities if the role is more visible. Agreed, he said. I have thoughts on the documentation approach, she said. I assumed you would, he said. She looked at him, he looked at her. The fire did its work between them and the room was quiet, and the northern fortress was old and settled around them, its centuries of use and purpose as present as the walls. She thought about the green notebook on the desk in her working room. The line she had written that morning. Still going north, she had written, did not want to stop. Ren, she said. Yes, he said. She leaned across the round table and she kissed him, briefly and specifically, and with the full attention she gave everything, and then she sat back. He looked at her. I thought you were setting the pace, he said. I am, she said. That was the pace. His expression completed itself, the way it had been completing itself in increments over 11 months, in libraries and briefings and east corridors and small dining rooms with fires. "Then I will follow it," he said. "Good," she said, "because the pace is going to be considerable. I am very efficient." He almost said something. She saw it start and become something else, not a deflection, just a thought that found a better version of itself. "I know," he said. "I have 11 months of evidence." She stood up. She picked up the folder with the cross-reference table. "The 3 disputed documents," she said. "I want to begin the secondary analysis first thing tomorrow." 7 o'clock, he said. 6, she said. He looked at her. "You have not slept enough." "I will sleep enough," she said. 6 o'clock. 6, he said. She went to the door. She stopped. "I am going to be very good at this," she said. Not arrogance, just the particular clarity of someone who has found the work they were meant for and is naming it. "I know," he said. "No copper." She went to her room. She opened the green notebook one more time. She looked at the line she had written that morning. Still going north, did not want to stop. She put the notebook on the shelf. She put herself to bed. Outside, the northern mountains were enormous and quiet in the dark, and somewhere in the fortress Pip was probably on a high shelf in the library doing his focused observation of whatever he had decided was interesting at this hour, and Agnes was managing the residence with the thoroughness of someone who had been managing it through several kings and had clear opinions about all of them, and the summer night was warm for the north, which was still cold by most standards, but which she had begun to find exactly right. She lay in the dark and felt the particular quality of a life that was the correct shape. Not easy, not uncomplicated. The work was significant and the position was demanding, and the things ahead of them, the summit, the preparation, the credential management, the challenges that would come with any important and long-term thing, were real and would require all of her. She had all of herself to give. For the first time in 23 years, she had all of herself to give, because none of it was being held back to manage the ability. The ability was part of the work. She was part of the work. She was here. The copper was absent. She slept. In the morning, she was at the library at 10 minutes to 6, and the east windows were doing their specific thing with the light, and the mountains were blue in the early distance, and Pip was already on the reading table with the expression of an animal who had been there for some time and found the waiting entirely acceptable. She opened the folder. She picked up her pen. She began.